Good evening, everyone. Welcome. This is the August 7th, 2018 Yarmouth Board of Selectmen meeting. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have a full agenda this evening. We'll begin with any public comments. Does anyone wish to be recognized? Yes, please identify yourself and tell us where you're from.
Sure. I'm Lisa Cody, and I live in South Yarmouth. Thanks for hearing me tonight. So at the last Board of Selectmen meeting, a letter was presented in support of Vineyard Wind. And we noticed that the packet that was sent to you didn't contain the text of that letter. So here it is with 100+ signatures from Yarmouth citizens across all ages and neighborhoods. It's a short letter, and if you'll allow me, I'd like to read it now. Is that okay?
As long as it takes 3 minutes or less.
It'll be less. Dear members of the Yarmouth Select Board, as citizens of Yarmouth, we urge the Select Board to act on behalf of the whole town and negotiate a host agreement with Vineyard Wind, contingent on the project's approval on required state environmental review. Yarmouth includes different people and neighborhoods, and the well-being of the entire town rests upon our Select Boards taking decisive action, apart from emotional arguments intended to discourage any action on an opportunity that is so clearly beneficial to the town. Yarmouth's interests and Vineyard Wind's interests overlap greatly in this matter. Vineyard Wind prefers the West Yarmouth site for its buried cable to come ashore, and Yarmouth's self-interest requires negotiating agreement terms that protect the town's resources. The best way to protect the future of Yarmouth's water quality lies through the temporary disruption, not destruction, of an already degraded Lewis Bay, and the use of the increased financial resources to begin reducing nitrogen and stormwater runoff in all of Yarmouth's waters. We ask that the Select Board weigh progress towards its stated long-term goals over temporary disruption and inconvenience. The funding stream for Vineyard Wind offers the best way to achieve progress towards the high-quality infrastructure, clean water strategy and implementation plan, and improvement of energy quality and security on the Select Board's official goals for fiscal year 2019. Thank you very much, and thank you for hearing me this evening.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Steve?
Steve Krinsman from Yarmouth. Just take 2 seconds. Energy seems to be a very big topic today, and I just got 2 things to talk about with energy. One, Vineyard Wind. As I stated at the last meeting, Lewis Bay is an important resource for the town of Yarmouth. So is the Vineyard Wind project, both of which can benefit the town of Yarmouth. I think it is ridiculous to think that they are mutually exclusive. They are not. We can protect Lewis Bay, which is important, and we can also make arrangements for the town to be the reception of the cable for Vineyard Wind. Second, I hope we haven't forgotten about the golf course, the links course at Bayberry. I just think it's an important area that we could use if we develop it for a solar farm. The amount of income that we can get from that is significant. Hopefully it doesn't fall through the cracks. Thank you.
Thank you. Vita?
I guess as long as other people are reading, I submitted the following letter to the Cape Cod Times last Thursday. I'm not sure whether they will use it, so I might as well read it. It's on the subject of Vineyard Wind. Obviously, it would have been helpful if the Times editorial board had viewed videotape of the July 17 Yarmouth Board of Selectmen meeting before they sat down to scribble their intemperate diatribe in the July 28 issue against the attendees at said meeting. Fake news. In fact, the chair commended everyone for intelligent, informative comments delivered in a civil tone. No one is against renewable energy. What many of us in Yarmouth oppose is Vineyard Wind's chosen route for laying their cables through heavily residential areas, including 2 schools and the town's only police station, thereby causing major disruptions. The company's insistence on the Yarmouth route is especially troubling because an alternate site is not only available, but also highly desired by the host community. The obstacle to Brayton Point location seems to be higher cost. Even if true in a multi-billion-dollar project, that is not a valid excuse. Start by using the quote-unquote millions being offered as a bribe to Yarmouth. If that is not enough, a few extra millions is not sufficient reason to dismiss Brayton Point, where the cables would come out of the water straight into a substation without causing unwelcome disruption. Do I have a minute or so for something else?
Go ahead. If it's short.
Look, not everybody's here, so I don't know. Can somebody please explain to me on what grounds would this board vote to okay an uninsurable structure at the drive-in site? I'm talking about the boardwalk. And I'm asking a question. I mean, this is not rhetorical.
Well, I think the board is still considering the options. I think we voted for a shorter, not a longer boardwalk as a primary approach. So I think the risks associated with that are substantially less, even if we are self-insured as opposed to obtaining insurance. And I don't think necessarily that insurance options are not attainable. It depends on how much you want to pay for insurance.
Well, it wasn't just Yarmouth. Apparently, Sandwich must have had similar insurance because they ended up having to, their taxpayers having to shell out the money to repair what happened there. So it almost sounds as though it is basically, unless you take it out of Lloyd's of London or something, you know. Then the other thing I want in connection with that, I would like to know how many regular members on the committee of that particular project are residents of the area, as opposed to alternates. I don't believe Mr. Nugent, who is being pushed now, proposed as the next regular member on that committee, is a resident of that area. Is there anybody else left? I don't know whether Mark knows it or not at the moment. I'm talking about the drive-in committee. I mean, Mr. Nugent's name was being pushed very highly there. How many members of the current committee are residents of the area, please? You know?
Are we supposed to, I thought this is just
You
comment.
can answer the question if you'd like.
Gateway aisles, there's no members, are there?
I would have to check, I mean, literally, this is all coming at me.
I realize.
I'm happy to check and follow up with you anytime.
Okay.
Okay.
Because if Mr. Nugent, I believe Mr. Nugent is not a resident of the area.
All right, let's move on. Your point is made.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else?
Tom.
Yes, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, fellow selectmen. Tom Nicanello from the Village of Bass River in this wonderful town of Yarmouth. Here tonight just to invite everybody, speaking from the Chamber of Commerce, we have some Yarmouth Summer Concert Series at the beach. I went last night, and there'll be 3 more, Monday, and there was about 300 people. It was absolutely perfect weather. As you know, we've had one of the best summer weathers that I can remember in a long time. It's been absolutely beautiful. So next Monday, we have the new beach band. They'll be starting at 6 o'clock, and hope to see everybody there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, the pre-host agreement for Vineyard Wind. Dan?
I have a item that was just received a few minutes before the meeting started from Vineyard Wind. So if I may ask legal counsel, Attorney Tellerman, to come to the front table to review the document. We generated a document for Vineyard Wind's review relative to executing language such that we could have a sum of money to retain legal and engineering services, and this document, red line that you have, is the responses that Jay had made relative to Vineyard Wind's commentary. 2 points I would make. One was Jay had added an insert relative to item number 8, relative to, it says here, nothing herein shall be construed as a limitation on the town's rights to confidentiality with its communications. And also changed some language here. The Vineyard Wind did, and it sounds like they wanted to cap maximum contribution at $10,000, which I'd indicated to Vineyard Wind would not probably go over well with the board. We have an estimate between $50,000 and $75,000 to negotiate through a host community agreement on legal fees from similar style projects with power plants. So I would offer the document to you and any commentary Jay may have. It just came in today.
Was this in our packet?
No, it just came in.
just came
So
in.
we had generated a document for Vineyard Wind to review. Their attorneys just got it back to me just not too long ago.
And then I commented on that this afternoon while I was here for office hours, so the
Well-
red lines.
This seems a little bit premature then, I think, at this point in time, having given this now and you guys not having the ability to actually take these comments and your comments. I
Right.
don't know what you want from us.
So I
at
wanted
this-
to, no, I wanted to make sure that you had it
Yeah.
in public session such that we could share it with you and get any commentary you'd like me to go back to Vineyard Wind and report on. I imagine the issue with the cap is one of concern, but certainly anything else that you have, I would like to be able to get that guidance this evening to generate another revision to the document.
So is this, so the red lines represent what then?
So the base of the document is, they sent us a revision of what I sent, but their revisions were small in number.
Okay.
And the red lines reflect my changes to what they did. And I highlighted in there the two caps that they have. I think if we left tonight's meeting with some direction on where Dan's going to negotiate with respect to those caps, I could see some payments just to seed us out, but
Right.
$10,000 isn't going to be enough to get smart enough to negotiate this in good.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, this is a joke. It's insulting, quite frankly. I mean, I haven't read this letter, but when I saw that section, all I had to do was read this, and this is ridiculous. I mean, don't insult us, all right? $10,000. We can deliberate over this at a future meeting, but I can't sign anything like this. It's ridiculous.
No, I don't think we're being asked to sign anything this evening, but, you know, the comments, I think, are appropriate. Mike, you thoughts on it?
Well, I first, before I get to that point, on number 8J, I understand what you're saying there. Should the word privilege also be inserted?
Yeah, I mean,
Because
privilege
the
or-
attorney-client is more than just confidentiality. It's
certainly.
an absolute privilege. And the other thing is, shouldn't we have some language in here that says, notwithstanding the fact that they may finance particular legal services for us, that attorney's duty is to us, and we have the same level of confidentiality and privilege in terms of our relationship to that attorney?
Yeah, I don't mind expanding upon that. I think
You
it's
know, in
inherent.
other words, they're paying the bill, but they're not going to compromise discussions, private discussions, strategic discussions,
Yep.
privileged discussions that we may have with that person that we hire that they're paying for.
Yep.
Because I think your language in number 8 deals more with our own attorneys and consultants. Now, maybe that wasn't intended, but that's the way I read it.
No, when you retained by the town, maybe what we could say, they're retained by the town pursuant to this agreement.
And then put something in there about the relationship,
Yep.
perhaps, and the privilege and confidentiality that goes with that relationship. I don't really know anything about this area of law, but I would charge you more than $10,000. An expert in this area, I don't know, Jay.
I
You'd
can
have to
tell you-
ask around and see what the rates are, but I would think you'd be talking closer to 50.
I think it's going to be at least that. So the way I see this, and I'll give you just kind of an anecdote. So when I was doing some work for Chatham, and we needed to negotiate some agreements and some potential resolution of disputes with respect to Monomoy, there was a certain amount that I could do under my agreement with the town at a basic municipal council rate. But given the nature of the federal laws and the complications that were involved,
Sure.
literally the lowest rate we could find for a seasoned attorney who was from DC was over $750 an hour. Now,
crazy.
I don't know how complex this is, and there is certainly a role for a lawyer here. We can do a certain amount, but then there's going to be, we're going to need some help with someone who's familiar with the industry. But I think more particularly, we need someone who can assist us, who might be legal, might be outside of legal on the revenue streams and the financial impacts of this, so that we can assess and become smarter and help us with the negotiation. I don't know what the cost structure is, frankly, at all, but it's going to be considerable given the uniqueness of this industry. So that's why Dan and I felt from the beginning that putting a cap on it at all was concerning. Now, I don't mind maybe having an initial cap subject to replenishment, but no matter what kind of project we do as a community, we could have someone doing a mall and have the planning board have a consultant for it. We never would put a cap on that. We can only charge a reasonable fee for it for what we need, but we would never, ever agree to a cap on our engineers, our groundwater people, or anything. That's just simply outside of the question. We could never, because you can't forecast what's coming down the pike. I don't think anyone on this board or anyone in Dan's office intends to be piggish about our consultants, and not at all, but we have to get on an even playing field with Vineyard Wind, whose knowledge base on this obviously is well above ours right now, and we're playing a lot of catch-up, so it's going to take some considerable services.
And there'd be some good faith that would be part of this agreement, expressed or otherwise, and certainly, you know, we have no interest in trying to drive up legal fees or costs or anything like that. We just, the only interest we have is in getting good, sound advice from people that have the expertise and to the extent that it's necessary.
Right, and beyond the basic covenant of good faith and fair dealing that's in all contracts, I'm happy to build in a good faith provision on escalating costs here.
Sure.
Well, the thing I can say is Nate's there, and I'd love to hear as to what his thought process was behind this offering.
Certainly, if you'd like to speak to this issue, Nate, you know, that's certainly appropriate.
Yeah, apologies. It's on our end that it's coming a bit last minute. I thought we might miss today's deadline and be discussing it in a couple weeks. So this is just kind of falling on your lap. The discussion we had in previous meetings, thinking it was quite constructive in terms of the town not being willing or able to incur costs for analysis and wanting to be able to be on a solid footing moving forward with any kind of negotiation like this. The agreement that you have before you is essentially a no strings attached agreement. So the cap being essentially, and if I can read just a small portion of it, it says the letter agreement's envisioned by the parties as the first stage of Vineyard Wind's material support for the town's review of a host community agreement with Vineyard Wind. As negotiations progress, parties acknowledge the potential need for future material support for the town's technical review, which may be provided for through subsequent mutual agreements. Point being that this is a sum to get the town started and calibrated and begin to do that analysis that they need to do before you can, in good faith, negotiate on behalf of your citizens. Seeing how that first stage goes, seeing how conversations go, we come back to the table and certainly provide those future supports that potentially get up to the $50,000 to $75,000 rough estimate that your town staff has given you over the need to to get the technical, environmental, legal review that you need. So we don't, for this to be sort of, here's $10,000 to analyze and now let's go cut a deal, that's not in any way what we're proposing here. What we're proposing is just to, create a first stage agreement where you are given the technical resources for at least the short term that you need, and then the discussion goes on, and if, in good faith, if there's a need for further review even in the short term, it's something we can revisit. And apart from the administrative difficulties of having to sign a new agreement and that kind of thing, I think we could probably work out with council some sort of potential for ongoing support that doesn't necessarily require us, revisiting a whole new contract at a new time. So we're certainly open to that. You've gotten this at the 0 hour. We'll get your council's recommendations as well, and we'll be able to look at that.
I think there, if I may, Mike and Mr. Chairman, the one concern that I have, just from a basic municipal law perspective, is if we engage a consultant in a contract, that contract has to be funded. So doing it piecemeal, first of all, I'm not sure we'll get a consultant who will say, I'll do 10,000. They won't get out of bed for 10,000. But I think that we have to have those contracts fully funded. So that, from a municipal law perspective, there is a concern there. Now, I could see doing it in some segments and use the term certainly. The word certainly isn't in here, no disrespect. So I think there could be potential subsequent agreements, but I think for us to even get to the point where we get smart enough to get there, I think that cap, if we're going to go with the cap, and I bristle at a cap, is going to have to be higher, or alternatively, this is going to have to wait until we actually find some people and have them give a proposal, and there would be a commitment to fully fund on the proposal. But I know that it's going to be from both the legal side, and we've already talked to some people, and the consultant side. It's going to be $10,000 to their point. I get what you're saying about let's take the first step. That won't even get us to a first step. I just see that as pretty unrealistic.
Yeah, so in response to that, we haven't, and not that there was a necessarily a need to in the short term, we hadn't gotten to a discussion of what the actual technical or legal needs might be, and fleshing that out a little further and seeing the town sort of saying, all right, here's the need that we see having, and this is going to be the cost of that. We can sort of work out a more fleshed out piece. This was just a an initial outlay. If it isn't sufficient to even sort of begin to answer the questions, then we can sort of step back and have a more in-depth conversation about what it should look like.
Well, personally, I think we need to put out an RFI or get some quotations for this service, and then let town administration negotiate with you further until you guys come up with something that I think is reasonable. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but maybe you need to see the quotes and to see what it is that we're requesting for you to feel comfortable coming up to the next thing. But to his point, we can't, if we don't have it here, we can't sign a contract with somebody to do it if it hasn't been funded. So
I'm a little bit bothered by those numbers, just like Jay is. I'm looking at an entity that has a lot of resources, that I'm sure is sophisticated and has access to their own attorneys that could probably give them some realistic estimates as to what these things would cost, and then come back with just these dismal numbers. Causes me to question how much good faith is coming, frankly, from the other side. From my perspective, I'll only entertain a host agreement if Yarmouth is able to negotiate it in good faith on behalf of its citizens with a level playing field, where there's no overreaching by the other side, where the bargaining power is level on both sides of the table. Otherwise, I would have no interest at all in any such agreement. And I think that the numbers that this agreement proposes, $10,000, is causes me really to wonder, to think deeper than the number and say, why would Vineyard Wind if they're really in good faith and wanted to negotiate fairly with the town, why would they put such a limiting figure in the proposed agreement? That's my reaction to it.
To justify the number for just a moment, this is unrestricted preliminary funding given to the town. What our group thought originally was, if it's a matter of putting this money on the table, offering it to the town so that they can take care of some odds and ends and some short-term needs with respect to analysis here, preliminary analysis, then we should just do that out the gate and not ask for anything in return. And that was the intention of this, is to get the ball rolling, and also to make sure that the town, which has already incurred staff costs, of course, because there's documents moving around, there's analysis that needs to be done, there's extra hours of time that you folks are having to put in on this, to recognize that at the outset and saying there's a cost to municipal government from the outset, from even entertaining an idea like this. That's the intention here, is to you know, and I added the underline, and our lawyer said that doesn't really have any legal bearing, but this is considered a very preliminary first stage disbursement to the town. It's, you know, completely unrestricted. If it doesn't meet the bar of having any utility whatsoever, then we should have another conversation and get, you know, a little bit more mutual detail. But I think that this as it was really considered, you know, pre-game, and not in any way considered to give you the full resources that you would need to analyze and to come to any kind of an agreement.
Given that, Nate, if you called this memorandum of understanding, or I'm not sure what the
It's just a letter agreement.
letter of agreement. How many more of these would Vineyard Wind expect to negotiate before we reached a point of actually entering into a host agreement?
I mean, you're going to have to, I think, before you theoretically sign a host community agreement, there's been a number thrown out there of $50,000 to $75,000. So I think this coming as unrestricted funds, moving down the line, let's say we're 3 to 5 to 6 weeks out, you've been able to use some of these resources to at least maybe even just to calibrate the resources that you need. You know, then there are subsequent items that Vineyard Wind is certainly willing to put forward to ensure that in the process of that negotiation, you're not digging yourselves in a hole to say, all right, we've incurred costs here, and if we aren't able to come to an agreement, the town's going to be in the red. Okay. So there's an open door in terms of future supports for that.
You know, I think to start with, I mean, if you're really anticipating that we'll have a smooth negotiation process, cutting it up into $10,000 chunks, I think, is what the board is really feeling uncomfortable with. If we were halfway there in terms of a number, and with the understanding that, 6 or 8 weeks from now, as the whole process progresses, that we sit down and come up with the final agreement before reaching a host agreement. If we were halfway there, then maybe the board would feel more comfortable with that. But it doesn't. This doesn't feel like it's the right start, because it just looking forward to 6 more of these before we reached an end point just doesn't seem reasonable.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, moreover, back to our town council's point, we're not going to be able to contract with anybody on the basis of $10,000 increments. So we got to look at, how much do you estimate this is going to cost? The guy's going to say $50,000. Well, we can give you 10 now, and maybe, who knows, 10 down the road, and maybe, who knows, 10 more. You're not going to get anybody that's going to be willing to enter into a contract with you.
I'm a little concerned about the notion that this one's unrestricted, which is good, but the future one may be restricted.
Well, it doesn't
I don't
say
want to.
that, though.
Well, this is what I'm hearing.
I know. I heard that too, but this document doesn't say that. It asks for documentation.
Right, and
Right.
I don't know what those restrictions would be. I don't want to have to go back, and I'm not going to, I don't mean it in the pejorative sense, but plead for more money and then have to accept a restriction on how we're going to spend it. As long as there's good faith on both sides, and I think there has been a clear demonstration of good faith on behalf of the selectmen to enter into negotiations on an item that's fairly controversial, and I think there's been nothing but good faith. I think they should have a little faith in us.
I think it's pretty clear that the only way that we're going to agree to this is that whatever the quote is to get the consulting and legal fees to get what we need is what we need, what I think we would support and what I would support. I feel your pain. I understand that you're taking a risk because you're putting out money with really nothing in return. But unfortunately, we have to have it, and this is what we've been saying the whole time to be able to get the answers we need. So, and you know, I'm not going to support something that's less than what we need. So whatever that number is, and I'm sure you'll get it, have that in here, and
It's $75,000 is what I've been told by legal counsel that negotiates these deals on a routine basis with other power plants. That's a good starting point. Likely should be able to cover the deal for us.
Okay.
I've expressed that to Vineyard Wind.
Okay,
Nobody's
just
more
recently?
disappointed than me than this. I said no caps, and 75,000 is a starting point, you know. Maybe 50,000 if we are expeditious, but certainly what we have here tonight is a far cry from what we talked about.
okay.
Yeah, I can understand the rub here, and it's certainly appreciated. There was a sense, again, I need to reiterate this. There was a sense that this would be, simply the first piece here, and that further review would, upon moving forward, that would work. If that number were to read differently, I think we would have avoided a lot of the feelings right now. And I'm understanding that. So I think we'll go back to the drawing board. We didn't want to have to get into the detailed technical needs potentially that the town might have within this, sort of basically saying you may need to figure out what your legal resources that are necessary are. You may need to figure out what technical resources that are necessary. So short of getting into that and saying, all right, well, let's get a quote, where's the bill, we'd start off on this foot. If this funding assists you in that effort as well, you would seek the advice of counsel, but I don't believe there are any restrictions other than an accounting of the money, how the money was used, which I think is probably required from other aspects of town government. So if it's not helpful for this, first
I don't
first
think it's going
move.
to get us there, sir.
Okay.
Nate, we've got to obviously expend some administrative effort just to go out for RFPs.
Exactly.
And, if we go through that process and look at the potential bids, if you will, that come in on that, and those bids come in at $150,000, where will Vineyard Wind be?
We'll be willing to, discuss that. I can't, hypothetically, I can't speak to that. But if that's the scale of review, we're also talking about legal review specifically, or
It's legal and consulting, right? And it may be one and the same, in that attorneys that have background in
Sure.
Negotiation of agreements with utilities. May in fact be the people to go to, but they may employ experts in valuation of the facilities.
Sure,
So
sure.
we don't know what we don't know in that respect.
So I would only leave you with a consideration that if this funding allows you to explore that without feeling like you're adding administrative burden to the town, I mean, there's no ask on the other end of this. There's no ceding of, this is, basically this is an attempt for Vineyard Wind to assume those very preliminary costs for the town instead of the town itself.
I think that my view is I'm in accord with our town administrator's comments. I would be thinking along same lines as he did, which is 75,000 starting and no cap. I didn't know that that's what you proposed, Dan, but I'm glad to hear that that was what you put out there. I think this $10,000, frankly, from my point of view, isn't even worth discussion. It's tokenism, and I think we have to come back with a realistic agreement that's predicated on what our actual costs are going to be, and that does not have a cap.
So typically with these activities, having done one myself and then talking to the attorney in this area that has negotiated a number of these, is there's the legal services, there's the valuation services, that's a specialized consultant, there's the scientific and engineering consultants. Typically, that's all brought under the umbrella of the legal firm that does this. These are folks that they make a living across the country doing these valuations, and I think what's not lost on me in this whole situation, when I brought this up to the beginning with Vineyard Wind, is, you know, this is touted as a first-in-the-nation project. $30 million thrown around a lot of different organizations and commitments for promises to get them to this point. And when I talked about, you know, what does first-in-the-nation 800 megawatts mean in valuation, this has never been done before. We are the first place in the country for something of this magnitude to land here, and it's important that we get it right. And that was expressed to the secretary, and you were in that meeting. It was expressed to the owners that represent this firm. I think at this point, saying to me tonight that, well, you know, use $10,000 to go out and construct an RFP to go out to bid for some of these services, that's just a delay tactic. I'm concerned that any further delays in this put us further and further behind the 8 ball. The EFSB siting questions continue to stack up. We get further behind the 8 ball. And this, to put it out to bid, to construct an RFP, to put it out for 30 or 40 or 60 days worth of advertising, that doesn't get me anything until 90 days from today. And by that time, you know, the MEPA finding could be done. All this precious time already has been expired. We know what the cost is. I explained it to them. Cut the check, get us $75,000, and let's start with this. But we can't move. And this is just, simply, I see it as a real problem tonight, because the magnitude of this project and $10,000 to the town, that's the landing point proposed, is problematic to me.
Well, I think you've heard the feedback at this
Sure.
point.
Yeah, and I do need to reiterate that there's no sense from Vineyard Wind, and there's no sense within this agreement, which admittedly fell on your lap as you sat down here, that this would be some sort of a here's $10,000 to, you know, negotiate this whole thing. So, loud and clear, I think we can come back with something that's going to work for everyone. You know, in a future meeting. I just want to make sure that this was a sense of the town already coming to us saying there's administrative burdens already on hand. We need to make sure that we're not going to be at any risk of being in the red on this thing.
But you have to understand, at this point, we're at a stop in terms of going. I mean, there's no point in this board saying to our town administrator to do anything else until we get some realistic numbers in front of us.
Great.
You know, I don't see any reason for our town administrator to spend time doing an RFP without any kind of
Sure.
progress on this.
Fair.
So I think that you know, my sense from the board at this stage is we would prefer our town administrator to wait and see, and when we have an appropriate agreement in front of us, we'll then begin the RFP process and move ahead quickly on that. But we don't want to be just nickel and dimed and stop and start.
Of course.
And so forth.
Understood. And I would ask, would it be possible to engage staff in a discussion of what those resources might be, so we can come to an agreement as to, you know, rough estimates of what the consulting needs are for the town, because that hasn't really been clear to us as well. Again, it's you know, it's all wild. It's, you know, uncharted territory for a lot of folks. So if we can get to some clarity on what the town thinks it might need. I think one of the issues here is were we to put that number out at any number, as you'd mentioned, it wouldn't potentially be sufficient because we don't know where we're going. So that was the intention of this first piece. But
Dan,
I hope
you
we can
feel
do that.
comfortable with that?
I don't. I've been very clear. Exactly what we need to do. We spoke to the experts we needed to speak to. You know, it's not lost on me that Vineyard Wind comes in and talks to me, and they bring in, probably to Jay's point, lawyers that are billing north of $500 an hour from some of the best firms in the Northeast. And there's a certain amount of professional courtesy that should be extended to this town, and we're not getting any professional courtesy right now. And that's a problem. I've explained exactly what it was. We spoke to the attorneys that we needed to speak to. It's by their own admission to us to ballpark this agreement with what you need for valuations, for scientific analysis, for engineering, peer review. $75,000 is a starting chip. I can't be any more clear than that.
That was, forgive me, that wasn't, that was a misunderstanding perhaps on our part, and I apologize for that. We didn't really, the expectation here was, for this piece, was not that it would cover the extent of that review.
Well, we can't do, Nate, to all due respect, we can't, as it was explained tonight, we can't do this piecemeal.
Sure.
We have to be able to have the funds available to encumber these resources, and we can't sit there and parcel out at a few chips at a time. You certainly wouldn't do that, and I know you wouldn't, because I've seen the team that you brought to Town Hall to talk zoning with us and some of these other things, and probably in that one day you expended $7,500 worth of professional labor to come visit us for the few hours. I mean, you know, for us to explain what these services might cost, frankly, I'm really put off by that, because your firm knows better than anybody what these services cost.
Great.
There's no question.
Well, let's have that conversation. I think we can come to a conclusion on it. I would hope that we can continue that dialogue and make sure that the town is comfortable with with the supports they're getting, that they're not feeling like they're like you're having to expend resources that might not be coming back to you.
All right, we're going to move along. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move into the next part of our discussion, unless there's anything more to be said at this point.
On what?
Thought we covered it pretty well.
On what? Vineyard Wind?
Vineyard Wind.
Yeah, I think the message has been given loud and clear. I stand totally, completely, 100% behind the comments of our administrator.
So do I.
Okay. Okay. Let's move ahead then into our next subject, the DY Regional Agreement discussion.
So I'm handing out a legal opinion that was drafted as a result of a past meeting with the board, some questions specific to the path forward for servicing the new school. I sent some documents for review and preparation of this. I know Ed Centio has some finance projections that he'd like to share with us as it relates to 20, 25, and 30-year notes that could be discussed, and Rich Bienvenu has done some what I would call the cost of deregionalization work in the past for us. And what we would like to be able to do is take the questions that you might have based on the information that we provided you to fill in the background that you might have on this particular question in front of us tonight.
Okay, well, I think the first item is is Ed going to give us a presentation?
Yeah,
on,
Ed, if you wanted to talk a little bit about the debt projection. I do know, Mr. Chairman, we do have a meeting tomorrow, and as part of that meeting tomorrow with the building building committee, I was going to try to get a better estimate from them as to when the short-term borrowing would be projected to be done. Much like Cape Tech, there's a two-series borrowing. There's a short-term to get the project started in 1 year, which they're going to cover in Cape Tech. The following year is when the actual big borrowing would take place. This is probably a similar scenario. MSBA will take a board vote. If the ballot question passes on December 4th, the board vote would be later in December. The ballot question is also considered to be the authorization to encumber debt. From that point, what does the schedule look like? It would probably be a period of 9 months to put out to bid and qualify the bidders and all that kind of stuff. And then from there, construction, I know, is looked at to be 18 to 24 months. So I'd want to get from the team tomorrow that final 2019-2020 finance schedule. But Ed put together this presentation based on what we know today. Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, no, I'll get it. Sure.
Gio, Finance Director. Dan is going to hand out the slides, so you have a copy in front of you. What we're going to talk today quickly about, because you have a lot of things on your agenda, is the total cost and the subsidies for this project quickly, the debt service options and estimates, debt service risk, or debt service estimate risks associated with what's being provided today, the debt drop-off that we've accumulated or may have going forward into the future, ballot options with the district vote and/or doing it not with the district vote, and then the board's position on the ballot and the term if you have or want to express opinion today, but you have some time to think about that. But we are also going to have the same discussion with a much smaller amount with Cape Tech in September, so we just want to see if you have any thoughts about the term of this agreement.
Do we have the memo also that was sent from the district consultant? Because the state share right off the top, I think, was a different number that they sent in their memo. 40%.
You talking about the letter that
Was from the consultant.
$43,810,000 was MSBA's proposed total share of the project. There's a lot of cost in this building
That aren't reimbursed.
are not
I
reimbursable.
understand.
That's correct, yeah.
I just thought it was I thought the percentage was about 40
Well, yeah,
something.
on eligible cost, that's about almost, I think it was going to end up being close to 46%. But the Matakees or that auditorium replication alone is a significant cost driver, as well as putting in some space. There was some requests to put in larger size space than what would normally be reimbursed. All of those deduct what the total
Right, so we
reimbursement
backed
is.
out all the non-reimbursable
Yeah,
pieces, is what you're saying. That's why this percentage is different than what he gave us.
that's correct.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Just trying to summarize this at a very high level, the total building cost, what the town of Yarmouth's share will be on a percentage basis and total amount, Dennis's share will be, and what the state's share will be of this entire project.
All right, I'm going to ask another stupid question right off the bat. Why this split specifically in terms of town share? Why isn't this split here based on student population?
It is based on the enrollment from, I believe, October 2017.
October 1, 2017.
19% is Dennis's percentage?
No. So what I've done is give you a percentage of what's left over after the state contributes their share.
So you'd have to
Okay.
divide 19.42 by 61.18 in
Okay.
order to arrive at what the Dennis contribution would be.
Correct. Thank you.
Okay.
And just to talk about the debt service schedules that you have, I believe that may have been handed out or emailed to you previously.
Yeah, I have a handout for those right here.
What we asked our financial advisor for were different scenarios so that we could examine those different scenarios. 30-year level principal, just looking at the highest level to the lowest level. I didn't want to put comments on each one of these lines. But the 30-year level principal or the 30-year level debt, that would involve a lower tax rate, a longer term, and the highest total amount of interest that would be paid. And then when you look at the 20-year option, that would have a higher tax rate, it would have the shortest term, and it would have the lowest total amount of interest that would be paid by our taxpayers. So, and you know, as we talked about, we have to look at this in conjunction with some of the other projects that we're doing to see, you know, what might fit best in terms of how we lay out the tax rate scenarios.
So just looking at the example that you provided, then in 2020, or 2019, this would cost per 100,000 of house valuation, $73.74 for the 30-year level principal, compared to $66.51 per 100,000. So a $400,000 house would be paying around anywhere between $260 and $300, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And it also goes to, if this tax rate is changing every year as it relates to this, is that easier or harder for our taxpayers to understand and for us to manage? So, some considerations as it relates to which of these debt service options we may end up choosing. I just want to outline some of the risks. One of the risks, of course, is if this might delay further, the cost per square footage or total cost of the project could increase. If we were to try to go through and do another scenario, will we have, the state reimbursement? Will we have the special earmark that the state gave us as it relates to this project? And then, obviously, there are interest rate risks as well in terms of potentially going higher than what was estimated here. Our financial advisor felt comfortable at 5.25. It could be less, could be more, but it depends on what happens with the overall interest rates.
Is that 5 3/4?
I think it was 5 3/4 on the
Yeah, it was. I apologize.
on the chart.
I apologize.
Oh, I see.
Wishful thinking.
The 20 years, 5 1/4, the 30 years, 5 3/4?
That's correct. It's not the same depending on the.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question on the previous slide before we get into this.
Yeah.
The item that says state and legislative earmark, are there any funds earmarked by the legislature for this project, or are we envisioning some
No,
extra funds?
The Cape Tech and the DUI district,
Yes,
through the last budget cycle, earmarked some additional funding
I
for
see.
both of the projects.
So should it be safe to assume that there's going to be an effort underway to provide or secure some extra funds legislatively
You mean over and
help.
above what they've already given us?
From the state?
So
Typically-
they've already earmarked funds.
Who has earmarked funds? The legislature?
Yes.
Over and above what we're getting through the school building assistance
So
program?
that's included in the overall
Yeah, I
percentage.
understand. I think there was 2 percentage points maybe were added to the Cape Tech reimbursement through the legislative process.
So are we, okay. So are we going to be getting a similar?
I believe we did, didn't we?
Well, we
For
ended
DUI?
ended up becoming more favorable. I'm not sure if it was due to the earmark, but.
Okay, I could be wrong there.
Yeah, we won't know the final number. By the way, the project hasn't gone through value engineering yet either, where there could be a reduction in the overall cost. But we're roughly at about, I think the last projection was about 46%. There was a couple of things the consultants were adding on for energy efficiency and maintenance plan that was allowing us to get a couple of extra points. But I'll confirm all the latest reimbursements tomorrow for you.
So it is possible that we could be pursuing through our legislative delegation an earmark of funds directly from the legislature that might help address.
Oh, no, that
No?
can't, that will
That's-
not happen. What they did is they
That's what I'm
earmarked.
getting at.
No, they earmarked, Cape Tech was, I believe it was a 2 percentage point that the legislative delegation was able to lobby for, added to the reimbursement schedule. That's how that's done.
Yeah.
They don't put out extra money. It's through the reimbursement points.
Okay.
I
So-
apologize. I thought it was for both ours
Oh,
and
so
theirs.
okay, that's
Yeah, I
that's the
apologize.
question that I'm, because this is all news to me that applied to
My-
this.
My apologies.
Okay, well, we got that cleared up, thanks.
What this is a summary on this slide of, slide 5, of the debt drop-off that we shepherded up until this point, and the amount that's was indicated prior was money that we were putting it to OPEB each year, and then this last fiscal year, we actually put the dollars into capital stabilization, and this is available for this or other projects, you know, DPW building or this particular building. We don't have a lot of debt drop-off into the future, but we do have some preserved debt drop-off that we had in the past.
So can you explain to me exactly what the amount is that we have in this particular fund for this fiscal year?
So we put into the capital stabilization fund $561,000
Okay, for FY19.
for FY19.
Okay, overall, what's the total amount that's in the fund?
I
Just
don't want-
curious.
Yeah, it's, I think it's.
Ballpark.
Yeah, around $1 million plus.
Okay, thank you.
So are these drop-offs all items that we would not have to have an override vote on?
Well, that's correct. We wouldn't have to have a technical override which would be in the case of an exempt debt
Right.
drop-off, for
So
example.
These are non-exempt.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
So the FY20 and going forward figure assumes no OPEB funding?
That's correct, because we switched to fully funding the ARC, which dropped our liability, dropped our annual OPEB payments. We need to contribute about $192,000 over and above what's already in our budget. So I think we can probably utilize free cash or other sources to make that work and stay away from using.
So
the
we'll
debt.
get funded, but by probably a different source.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
And just looking at the ballot for DY, it could be part of the actual district vote. It would have to be a separate ballot from the district's ballot, so there'd be two ballots, one for, you know, potentially a debt exemption and the other for the district vote. The other is to do it after the district vote or obviously before the district vote, but we're running out of time for doing anything before the district vote. And just to let you know, I got a call from Bob Sanborn. We talked about debt and funding, but they're looking to have a meeting in September to get the town of Yarmouth and everybody else's opinion in terms of whether we want to do a 20-year or 25-year debt schedule. I think the consensus of the other members, who, you know, many have lower amounts that they have to contribute, was to do a shorter term as opposed to a longer term to save on the total amount of interest that would be paid. But, you know, that is, if you want to give some feedback about that today, that would be great, as you perhaps talk about what you might want to do for DY. And discussion of the terms and conditions for the DY debt. And do you have any questions, or obviously you may want to discuss this further? Much easier talking to you about Cape Cod Energy Park, where we're actually going to get the money as opposed
Yeah.
to taking money away.
Exactly. Has there been any, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind,
Go ahead.
let me, while we're reviewing documents here, have you had a chance to kind of look at what the impact of this project could be in terms of the tax rate?
Yes. In terms of everything else that we're
Yeah.
looking at, yes. I updated the model that Rich put together.
Put together? Yes,
and-
that very good model.
Yes,
Yeah.
and we can send that out, just so
I
you
think that would be
understand.
helpful to know. Is there anything that you feel comfortable sharing with us tonight in terms of what that might represent?
I'd probably rather spend a little bit more time with it and
Yeah.
send it out later if I could.
Okay.
I
I'm
already
just,
messed one thing up, so I don't want to do that.
well, I'm very interested in that kind of information,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I don't know, do we have any thoughts on this? 20 versus 25 versus 30?
Well, I'm always interested in hearing what the recommendations are from our crack finance team. And I see Rich is in the audience, too, so between Rich and Ed, I'm very much interested in hearing their recommendations, if they care to share them with us tonight, or maybe they want to.
I think the tax rate is more of a political decision as opposed to a financial decision. If I were going to do it for my own financial situation, I would do it one way. But as we talk about and look at the demographics of the town of Yarmouth, perhaps, there's a different decision. But what we can do to help inform that decision is to try to look at it in terms of some of the other projects that you may be weighing
Okay.
as you go forward.
Well, do you have any thoughts about the difference between 20 or 25 years? I'm very much interested in tax rate implications, so I would pitch that at some point, Mr. Chairman, we have that conversation. But in the meantime, I'm interested in your recommendations on this. If you're not prepared to say tonight, I'm happy to bring that up at some other time. But I do think people are genuinely interested in what this all means for
I think what'll be helpful is in Cape Tex, when we first met with them a while back, it was clear that there was only maybe out of the 12 towns, maybe one or two that had an interest in doing a 30-year. The vast majority ones, particularly the smaller ones, wanted the 20-year. And Barnstable and us, we were pretty consistent with probably 25. Knowing what we knew about what was going to come onto our schedule, 25 looked pretty good. So let's wait, if we could, till we meet again with Mr. Sanborn. And then that way we'll have a better sense of what that carrying cost is going to be for us. And then we can plug in a better projection as to what option would be for you from a political sense on the tax rate situation.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what, we put together, I think we need to have the Finance Committee in on this as well, in terms of the impact on our total forecasted tax rate, and what our debt situation is going to be. I mean, we need to hear from them as well as our own finance team.
We could certainly schedule a joint meeting probably right after the Cape Tech decision's made, and provide everybody with the same information at the same time.
Okay.
can we go, well, I think his point about the timing of this is important. I mean, having a ballot to fund it, if we could do it at the same time, would be great. We could have a ballot with the total number being exempt without having the term on the ballot?
That's correct. We could potentially put the principal on the ballot, not the entire debt service. Or like Cape Tech, we didn't put a number at all. So
I think having the number is important, though. I mean, to the point of it, I think, it's easy to vote for something when you don't see the cost of it. I think people are going to really be shocked when they get their tax bills when that goes on in it. And so, to the point of knowing the struggles that our residents go through, and so many on a fixed income. I mean, obviously, I think if it was any of us, it's clear that the shorter amount that you go, there's a bigger savings. But inconclusive with everything else, you really got to look at it. But I would think putting a separate ballot at the same time that has a dollar amount would be a cost savings. And, to me, it was like, with Cape Tech, it's easy to go in and vote for something that doesn't cost you anything. It's like, oh, yeah, I'll vote for that. But then when you see, maybe they need to know that amount's going to be put on the taxes.
This is a different magnitude than Cape Tech.
So, if we were able to do that, I would support having two ballots at the same time, one with a number, maybe not having the final decision of the terms of that funding, but I think it's important that when they vote, they know it's going to cost them.
And I'm assuming that the district would also consult both towns as it relates to the term, which isn't necessary. Bob Sanborn obviously is doing that, but it's really their decision.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, it would be Dennis and Yarmouth getting together and hopefully working with the school district to decide what is the best, what are the best terms for both communities.
What has been the typical presentation for impact to town residents when we do the ballot vote of this type?
They
I mean,
usually
is
do
it-
like the cost per thousand. It's not much of a, we haven't had anything this
Yeah, this
significant
is
in so
big.
many years.
Right, exactly.
We could do a series of workshops leading into the ballot question and with some information. I think that, I mean, to Selectman Post's point, this is an enormous dollar value that hasn't been seen by the voters probably in a long time. So we would want to do some outreach, maybe through Channel 18 and some public announcements as it relates to what the cost would look like. And certainly the school's going to have their own campaign as well, I'm sure. We'll learn a little bit more about that tomorrow night. But there's no question, to your point, it's easy to vote for something good when there's no dollar associated
Oh,
with
right.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, even the impact per $100,000 house makes it sound like a palatable amount, but there aren't any $100,000 houses around.
It's per 100.
And,
Just a few.
And I think we have to get rid of the median, the mythical median $300,000 house too,
Exactly.
because that dog's dead.
and,
It's a lot higher than that now.
I don't know where you guys are living,
I think
but
what the financial advisor has indicated when we talked this weekend about this is that they use the $100,000 because you're able to multiply it out fairly
Per
easily
100, yeah.
to get to what your tax, total tax would be. So if you give one number at, say, $361,000, then if you have a house of a smaller level or a lower level, then you have to do a little bit more complicated math than
Right.
if you did it at, say, $100,000.
Well, I think that anything that we put out as a town should demonstrate, you know, some of those calculations so that we don't end up leaving people with an impression that's entirely different, so. Okay, I think we'll come back to this then. All right, did we have additional information that was going to be provided tonight? I don't
Well, it's
know.
really more a matter of, I mean, we've sent over to you a lot of documents for your review, and if there was a certain uncertainty that you might have had, you know, Jay's here to answer some of the legal pitfalls. This is clearly, I've spoke to a number of people about this vehicle that the school committee decided to choose. It's definitely a rare option, so not a lot of folks had known about it, and Jay and I in our discussions, and certainly discussions I've had with other folks at the state level, this likely ended up in the legislation due to the problem associated with town meetings, sometimes getting stuck here. So this is like, I call it the nuclear option, supermajority vote by the school committee, take it right to the voters, and it's going to be an interesting fall for sure for us. So I personally would, you know, if we had a ballot question that wins, to have the financing taken care of and win on, in December would make my winter and our team's winter a lot easier to deal with, and certainly make the spring a lot easier to deal with. The unease of not knowing how to finance this, knowing that if the ballot question were to fail, that's going to take a lot out of our hide to finance that. These are very large numbers, and with the debt would have to be paid one way or the other, so.
Well, I think the other, I mean, that's kind of dodging the question. Yeah, certainly, it seemed clear to me, I know, from the explanation of the choice of, was it 16D or 14D and 16N? I'm not sure which paragraphs were associated with which, but the D was the town meeting approach versus the regional vote, which was the paragraph N in the state regulations. It was clear that from the explanation that the different levels of school committee vote were based upon an opportunity for the school committee to make a decision that they wanted to go with a regional vote as opposed to a town vote, but that they needed a higher number of votes in order to agree to that, which they did.
Right.
So that's where we are. So we have no real room for movement on that issue at this stage.
You know what I found interesting in doing my own research and also looking at others' research, that if you went to town meeting on the issue of whether or not you wanted to do the school project, the voters wouldn't be approving the sum of money. The meeting would be called for purposes of disapproval.
Disapproval.
Which I found
Correct.
kind of fascinating. The meeting would be called to see if the voters were to disapprove it.
It's true. So, and that's been a misnomer forever, but even more complicated than that, you could have a vote to approve it, and if it was negative, it would count as disapproval, or you could have a vote to approve it contingent on a debt exclusion, and it could pass with flying colors. Then the debt exclusion would fail, potentially, and it would count as disapproval. So the only thing that town meeting has a right to do is disapprove. Should they vote to approve, they're just blessing it. They can't.
And then they would have to come back with another, the school would have to then come back with another proposal, which I think the statute says can be the same proposal.
They could do it over and over again. It's not like a budget, which is a little different, where they can go back and recertify. If there is a disapproval by either of the towns, it's dead.
It's kind of like the fire station they did in Barnstable. They just kept coming until the voters had enough and finally approved it.
You know, one of the last caveats to put in there is the MSBA will be sending correspondence to us relative to the failed vote option. That's why I sent that to you ahead of time. I knew that was coming. Once they take that vote in December to approve the project, you have 120 days to demonstrate the finance vehicle for it. So essentially, the ballot question for us is the finance vehicle if it were to pass. In that particular case, what the MSBA was very clear to make sure that I understood was that if perchance you don't get the finance to happen on this project and you don't get the reconciliation with 120 days, back of the line. So there's so much need across the Commonwealth for school aid money that they have sent the message out loud and clear that if you cannot finance these projects in that 120-day time frame, you will not have another chance to come back to the table. So you just file another SOI and you start it again.
I guess turning to the other memorandum that we received is a lengthy discussion of the withdrawal process and basically going through and another alternative, which is if we felt that Dennis was not negotiating in good faith, we could petition the legislature for a special act to allow us to get out of the agreement. But it sounds as if even at that, in order to do that, we would have had to have an attempt at withdrawal.
I think it would go a long way to satisfying some of the criteria in that Worthington case, that you give it your best shot to work things out with them, whether it's withdrawal or to amend the agreement in a way that suits your desires in good faith. But I think there'd have to be something. Now, I think those foundations are already clear because the town has already approached amendments in good faith to try and level the playing field a little bit. So I think that one is less of a concern for me, establishing that, because I think you've already done a lot to get there without the kind of response that you'd like to see on the other side. I'm more concerned about some of the other issues that came up in the Worthington case on financial impact. Now, in the Worthington case, there were a small player in a much larger region, so everything about their withdrawal in terms of the impact to the rest of the region, the courts found it was kind of speculative. They just didn't know, and they could be kind of more invisible. In a two-town region, not so easy. And to be invisible, to withdraw because the other town is left holding everything or trying to pick up the pieces, and to satisfy the criteria under the so-called local mandates law, would mean that we would have to demonstrate that there'd be no adverse financial impact to Dennis and a proportionate financial benefit to the town of Yarmouth. So some of that is the proof would be in the pudding on how you set forth the special act to still leave Dennis whole and being able to easily pick up the pieces in the same manner that you are too. I think it would be a heavier lift than what Worthington did. We can't assess the likelihood of success in that, but at least we have a template from that case on how we would go about it. But, and then, you know, it comes down to dollars and cents effectively.
Now, the fact that Dennis has 2 schools, they have not closed any schools. So they have 2 schools which previously contained all of their children from kindergarten through, I think at one point, 8th grade. Would imply that their 2 schools are suitable in to address the needs of their community, K through 8. So,
And K through 7 at this point.
or K through 7 at least.
So-
I'm not sure how Dennis could argue that they would have to incur additional costs with regard to their K through 7 schools
that's
if
the-
they
on
put
the-
them in their existing facilities like they had them before.
That's on the amendment side, slightly different animal,
Okay.
rather than a withdrawal side where we would have to figure out a way to make sure that they were left whole or with reasonable opportunity for K through 12. On the amendment side, again, you could do a special act if you want, or we could go through the process. Again, still need some participation by them for amending the agreement to, you know, take certain grades out, the K through 7 or what have you. Same analysis ultimately might likely be less costly, and there'd likely be less impact to them. You'd have to consider the programmatical concerns on making sure that those facilities would have no drop-off or could be retrofitted or fitted in general to suit those K through 7, K through 8 needs. All possible.
Right.
It's just how creative do you get, and then it essentially comes down to money. The analysis that I took away from the Worthington case is that money could solve all of it. If in fact someone was going to challenge the basic legality of a special act, what I think the message that I'm hearing from the Worthington case is okay, it's about money. As long as you're not like leaving them in an untenable position and it's workable and there's good educational opportunity across the board, money could solve anything. Now, that amount of money is something that Yarmouth would have to swallow. Now, the town of Pembroke did that. They spent a lot of money to get out of Silver Lake, more than they saw an immediate benefit to. But I've done work for Pembroke, and I do work currently in Silver Lake for the town of Kingston. The folks in Pembroke are thrilled with their decision. They weren't so thrilled at the beginning, or some of them weren't, because it cost a lot of money. They're pleased now with what it's done for their community and their local control. But
I mean, the option of saying, just as a hypothetical, that we're no longer going to entertain any dentist students in Yarmouth facilities, and we're going to use part of the high school to house some of our students, since that would free up, I don't know, there's probably about 600 students in the high school from dentists. I'm not sure if the math is exactly right, but it's somewhere in that neighborhood. But 600 students would free up a lot of space here. But the impact on dentists in that case would be significant.
yeah, the facility needs for a high school, or, I mean, it ramps up as you get into the high school years, certainly. And dentists would, I would imagine, and I am no expert in this, but I would imagine they would be looking to Yarmouth to make sure that they had a well-funded opportunity for a full state-of-the-art high school experience for their students.
So, I guess, you know, I don't know.
Well, we could, I mean, I think one of the things that, you know, personally, I think the high school is what it is, potentially a partial withdrawal or a restructure of the K-7 back to what it was, where we maintain our own schools in our own towns, which is what I think that a conversation was a long time ago. We'll be responsible for the capital in our town, you'll be responsible for the capital in your town, and K-7, leaving the high school alone. That, that analysis has been done by both towns. There was a financial impact to Dennis to the tune of about $2 million. This was, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago when they did it. And most of it is in administration, another superintendent, blah, blah, blah. But, what about the potential about not having that? We had, well, there's hybrid options, I think, as well, that I'm not, I think the voters are going to tell us the story of what we need to do at this point. We're in a scenario now that, unfortunately, I think to the taxpayers of Yarmouth, we've done our due diligence in trying to do the best we can. We've asked the school committee, they have the opportunity to put an amendment before town meeting, before this vote, if they wanted to amend the regional agreement. We really have no control over the situation at this point. They elect school committee members to represent the taxpayers of Yarmouth. This is what they're doing. This is what we've been dealt. It's out of our hands. If the taxpayers feel the way that we feel, then they're going to tell us. And I think at that point, we could have this conversation. But at this point,
Yeah. Well, if I might, one question that Jay and I had discussed in the past, and I know other districts have done this, it was recently done in Hamden, I believe, or Hamden and Wilbraham, one of the two, relative to a non-binding ballot question as to what, if you want to know what the pulse of the people is, non-binding ballot question related to what you want to do, K through 7 or whatever, that before you go down a road, because you'd have to expend a lot of capital to get this together, that would be a best way to understand what the sentiment of your voters would be, So that might be something you could consider.
I think the December vote is going to tell us the story of what our voters think and what they want.
Well,
I mean, if they support the school at the rate that they're at now, I don't know what we can do. We have tried everything. We have worked very, very hard to try to do the best we can. The school committee has forged forward. It is what it is. It's the way I feel at this point. After all the advice that we've been given, the horses left the barn.
Well, I'm not sure.
We got locked outside.
If we logically think through the scenario of, okay, well, what do we do here with a K through 7 Yarmouth only option, and K through 7 Dennis only option, separating. What does that accomplish? It still leaves us with Yarmouth with the need to replace one school.
2 schools.
And substantially modify the other. If we want to end up combining our 2 elementary schools, we're going to end up with a major renovation, probably of Station Avenue. No matter how distasteful those options are at this stage, I mean, we'll be faced with those one way or the other. And timing is lousy. Having to do all of them at once is really, I don't know how we could have planned it worse.
We didn't plan it.
No, we didn't plan it.
That's what I think that people need to understand.
It was done 50 years ago, so.
This really is not in our control at this point. From everything that I've read, the school committee has made a decision. It is what it is. I mean, we can continue to get upset and be angry or whatever, but here we are. So if we don't have cooperation from our partner, our so-called partner, or the school committee, it's just us. So,
Mark, Mike?
I think you're both right. You're right, Norm, about in the aftermath of all this area of disagreement with Dennis on capital funding, we're still going to be left with the reality, even if we were to de-regionalize below the high school level, of having to replace the buildings. On the other hand, I think what Tracy's getting at, and I certainly am in sympathy with her position, we've been put in a very untenable position where we really don't have control, in the absence of the agreement being modified, of changing the fact that we'll be owning about upwards of 70% of the cost. And Dennis will be getting themselves a really good deal. And not only that, but going forward with this cements the two towns together, binds the two towns together for a very long time. Whereas if, back to your point, the town had to take on more debt and take on more of a financial burden to do Mattakey School and then the ME Small School independently, at least you'd break the bond going forward, and you could be kind of the master of your own destiny in the long term. So those are, I think, the two sides of the equation, both valid, both different aspects of the problem that we're being dealt with. I think what we can do, though, Tracy, is make our position known to the voters and educate the voters as to the efforts that were made to try to renegotiate the agreement, what Dennis's response/non-response was, and what our recommendation is going forward on this vote. Hopefully we'll be able to at least enlighten them as to who's really putting them, and I'm talking the voters of Yarmouth at this point, who's really putting them in this position. It's certainly not us, as you said. It's the school committee that has done this. And in terms of the lack of equity in funding, it's the Dennis subcommittee that has done that.
but not true, though. The school committee themselves has the ability to put the amendments before town meeting. They could solve this.
They could put the meetings, the amendments forward, and I personally think they should have put the amendments forward.
We asked them over, almost 2 months ago now. They haven't even discussed it. That's how important it is to them. So.
Well, I'm afraid what I've heard in the building committee is also true of the school committee, that they feel that the funding of this is not their problem.
Okay, well.
And they're concerned with the appeal of building a new regional 4 through 7 school, and that's great. And people like us should worry about how it's going to get funded, because that's not their problem.
Well, unfortunately, it's at the cost of the taxpayers, and more than it should be. And, we can fight against it and lose the, 40% reimbursement. That's a lot of money.
Sure it is.
There's no win here for us. There's no win.
Mark, what do you feel?
I really can't add anything to this conversation. We've pretty much beaten it to a pulp.
We have.
And there's really, I don't want to be repetitive.
Yeah.
I really don't at this point.
I feel like the voters are going to tell us what we need to know. If they feel that this is a fair deal and they want to continue this partnership for another 20 years, then vote for it. If
But
you
they got to
don't,
know all the facts, Tracy, and I think that's where we can be helpful, is shedding light on the financial reality of this situation and how it came to be.
The interesting thing here is that at the end of the day, whether we were in a K through 7 Yarmouth only, or in a combined 4 to 7 Dennis Yarmouth School at middle school at Station Avenue, and then finally a renovation of Station Avenue and addition to Station Avenue. At the end of the day, Yarmouth children will benefit from having all their facilities in one geographic area, no matter which way this whole process goes. And Dennis will benefit most from the standpoint of having their children going to one 4 to 7 school in Yarmouth, one location for 4 years, as opposed to 2 locations now. Yet, they're not willing to do anything more than exactly what is in the regional agreement, which members of their community have stated is not reasonable. And members of their community have said that they believed that it was worth more than 32% for them to achieve a more reasonable way of educating their children. And, you know, so I think Dennis is speaking out of both sides of their mouths when they talk about their willingness and support of education. They support it as long as it's on Yarmouth's dime, and that's the way it's been. And unfortunately, we've spent at least 6 months, 9 months of frustration trying to work with them on a more reasonable approach. This time. I don't know, it's been 7 months this time, 6 years in total, trying to work with the town of Dennis. And, you know, so I'm done with the frustration. I'm going to put it behind us. Lynn and Tracy, I think you summed it up. Our voters will let us know where they want us to go on this. But I think we need to have our eyes wide open in terms of what is the financial impact going to be on our town at the end of the day? What is our debt load going to be? What is our tax rate going to be at the end of the day when we have to build 2 schools, not just one, 2 schools, a DPW building, and fund our current needs? It's not going to be pretty, folks. And if we need to take a breath, now's the time to take the breath and to send the school committee back to find a less expensive solution. And, you know, I think that's a basic issue right now, is we've got very expensive schools. If you compare our per student cost of educating our children to other schools of similar size and demographics, we are very high. Very high. And I won't guess at the number, but there's a lot of money to be saved. And, you know, if we keep creating a situation with a school committee that just says, well, it's somebody else's problem how to fund all of these spending needs, well, it's going to show up in the tax rate. And we should be presenting exactly what the impact is. And our finance committee should be out in front of this in terms of educating our community on what the tax impact on Yarmouth is going to be of all these obligations that we have on the table, and of what is going to happen with continuous spending, because it's not going to stop. The overrides of the last 2 years are not going to stop. We can bet that the next budget for Yarmouth for operating costs of the schools are going to be looking for another override. The numbers are there.
I guess the last thing before Jay leaves was the one question that we had in terms of what our ability is in terms of education of the public. about the particular project and our position on it. You know, I had brought that up the last time, but just
We had
curious.
mentioned, in furtherance of Tracy's point, things of, absentee ballots and things like that, and I think you made a comment about there are things you can do, but there are parameters as to what we could do, and if I wasn't mistaken, you were going to give us some kind of a handout on that.
We can do that. There is a state handout, and I'll make sure I'll get that to you. I mean, the shorthand right now, but I will get, there's a specific state guideline on that. I'll make a note of that.
I mean, it's-
Absolutely take a position, a public position, as a board on how you want to. You absolutely cannot use municipal resources, money, your stationery, whatever, to advocate for that position. You absolutely can do position-neutral things, like there's a vote coming up, absentee ballots can be had here. There's a vote coming up, here's what it's going to cost. Absolutely position-neutral. Become educated. There's a vote coming up, come to the meeting at the library or wherever on such and such a date to discuss. Those things are all neutral. We will get you the state guidance on it.
I think one of the biggest things that, depending upon the years, but we're looking at the first year, this isn't like Cape Tech. We're looking at somewhere between $3 and $4 million. So if the regional vote passes and the debt exemption doesn't, the regional vote says, just like the Cape Tech says, you get your money. That means if we can't get a debt exemption passed, that means $4 million. $4 million will have to be paid by the town budget without the ability to raise taxes. If the regional vote passes, and the regional vote, what people have to understand is that's not just Yarmouth. That's 50% of the vote plus one, right? For a regional vote to pass. That's both Dennis and Yarmouth.
Correct, district-wide.
District.
Yep.
So if it gets passed and we can't get a debt exemption passed, we're gonna have to cut the town budget by $4 million. So it's not a small amount of money or a smaller amount of money like Cape Tech. It's gonna hurt. So I think we have to be very very good in the way that we educate people. And again, I really don't feel there's a win here. So for us to, it's hard because as much as we don't agree with it, if we say don't vote for it and the regional vote passes and we can't fund it, then what do we do? It's an awful position to be in because all of us and the entire community will feel it. And I don't mean your tax rate if it passes. I'm talking about for services, police, fire, everything. So there's no win. There's no win in this game.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's go on to the public hearing segment. We're starting a little bit late on that. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the first matter we have is a special entertainment license for the German American Club. Good evening.
Good evening.
I don't speak German, so we're going to have to do this in English.
That's all right. My name is Leonard Klein. I'm the president of the German American Club of Cape Cod. And
All right, before you start,
Oh, I'm sorry.
that's okay. Let me just read the legal ad, which I have to do, into the record, and then you go, okay? The Board of Selectmen, acting as the local licensing authority for the town of Yarmouth, has received an application from Leonard Klein on behalf of the German American Club of Cape Cod for special entertainment licenses to provide live music with a two-piece band, amplification, and dancing at St. David's Episcopal Nelson Hall, 205 Old Main Street, South Yarmouth, Mass. Entertainment will be held on October 13th and December 15th, 2018, between the hours of 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock p.m. Hearing will be held on Tuesday, August 7th, 2018, in the hearing room at Town Hall, 1146, Route 28, South Yarmouth. The Selectmen's meeting begins at 6 p.m. Written comments will be accepted in the Selectmen's office until 4:30 p.m. on Friday, August 3, 2018. Verbal comments will be accepted at the hearing. Okay, Leonard, we're all set. You can proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stone. And thank you for your time. We're a 501c7 organization, a social club. We hold events once a month. We previously have our events at St. Mary's Episcopal Church in Barnstable. They're engaging in a major renovation, hence the application here in Yarmouth. Half of our members live within commuting distance, and half of our members live in commuting distance of our other venues, so it kind of worked. We also have, well, let me put it this way. What are your questions? You know, we're a small organization. Our median age is somewhere north of 78. I'm one of the youngest members. And we're not rowdy. We don't. We do a BYOB, wine or beer. We do not sell or serve alcohol. It's strictly brought in.
Okay.
And, yeah.
We don't have any regs on BYOB. You can just do that. Can you pronounce that German word for Christmas party for me?
Weihnachtsfest.
Can you say that again?
Weihnachtsfest.
That's pretty good. I think you deserve to get your application approved just on that basis.
So moved.
Thank you.
We have to go to the public. Is there anybody out there that would like to be heard? Either for or against, please state your name and what you have to say.
Yes, my name is William Massey, and I live on Fontenot Road. I'm opposed to this special permission to hold these two events on October 13th and December 15th for two reasons. 5 years ago, or within the past 5 years, several of us have put in a substantial amount of monies into Fontenot Road. There have been 4 brand-new buildings, homes, and 1 completely renovated. And each of us with the understanding that this was a residential area. Therefore, we thought it would be very quiet, very reserved. The second point, Fontenot Road is a private road, dirt, 1 lane. And there would be a substantial problem for us living on that road if, in fact, the overflow from this event is only going to wind up on 1 road. That's Fontenot Road. And it'll be very difficult for us to get in and out of our driveways. And I would expect that if, in fact, and hopefully you will not allow this event to happen, that if you do, at least the police department would somewhat be directed to put no parking signs on that road, with the understanding that if you do so, your car will be towed. I appreciate you listening to me. Thank you.
May I address that?
Certainly.
Okay, 2 things. Number 1, our attendance at these events, the Oktoberfest will be somewhere between 40 and 50 people, and that the traffic would be reduced by at least 40% because a number of those people are still couples. The second thing is Nelson Hall in itself is soundproof, and there is no rowdiness or anything that happens there. As I mentioned before, I'm one of the youngest members of that club, and we have never had any problems where we ever have been in any kind of partying or anything like complaints at all.
What about?
I can appreciate the
What about the
comments.
traffic concern? What can you do to ensure that traffic won't be?
Well, they have plenty of parking there at the lot itself at Nelson Hall at the church.
How many spaces do they have, do you know?
Well, not offhand, no, I don't know directly, but I have experience there. I helped out at their Thursday night dinners that they had around 8 or 9 years ago, and they had maybe 40, 50 people there for those events, and just people left normally out. No problems that I saw at all. Never had any problem going or coming.
Ma'am, would you like to be heard?
My name is Marguerite Connolly. I live at 32 Fontenot Road. I abut directly to St. David's Parish Church property. And they have had a couple of instances where the noise was extremely loud. They have megaphones that could have reached to the high school. I mean, it was so loud and so bad, and I ended up going to the police department, calling the police department, and asking them about a shut-off time, and they said 11 o'clock. So at 11 o'clock, they were supposed to be done. It didn't happen. It was after 11:30, and the megaphones that they had, or the sound system that they had, was way beyond. And you say that it's contained indoors. I would ask for a stipulation that anything that they have there stay indoors. If you get out, you get into our property, our privacy. Not pleasant at all. We've been there for a long time, and we have not really had a problem. And the more people you bring in, the more cars. Like we say, we're on a dirt road. The dust, the noise, everything is involved there for people that have a very private lifestyle. So I ask for consideration that if they say 6 to 8 o'clock, that it's 8 o'clock and it's all indoors.
I think their hours, ma'am, are 6 to 10 that they're
It's 6
requesting.
to 10, it's
6
all...
to 10,
Oh, I'm sorry.
They're requesting 6 to 10.
yes.
Yes, and it's all indoors, none of it is outdoors.
But people
And
leave.
it would be over before 10 o'clock.
Uh-huh.
We just put that time frame in there to give us enough time to clean up and pack up and leave.
Yes, but it's the busyness of the area. This is a very small area, and you're very confined with the single road in and out of on our street. You have 2 buildings over there. You have a daycare center. You have the church facilities that have different functions there. All well done in the daytime and everything else. But come nighttime, you know, it's a whole different story. You have people, strangers walking around on your property. I am right up against it. There's a cemetery, no problem with those people. They're quiet, not a problem. But the people that come into that place, there's noise and worry. Who are these people? Are they coming into my backyard? I don't have fences. There's trees and brush there, which gives me privacy. But I say no to multi-functions there, and anytime you have a sound system that's going to interfere with us, you have no idea how that echoes in that area.
I can guarantee you we have no megaphones, and it's not a rock concert.
Sir, let me ask you this question. Is the amplification system your own system, or is it a
It
system
will be the
that's in-
band's.
Or is it a system that's at St. David's?
My experience has been as the bands.
No, that's not my question.
Well,
The
it's not, we
amplification
don't
system.
own an audio system. We rely on either, at Barnstable, it's
So they're going to bring their own amplification system, or are they going to use a system that's already there?
probably a combination of both.
Do you know?
I'm sorry?
Do you know either way?
Either way, no.
Okay.
What is the hall typically used for?
Pardon?
What is the hall typically used for?
Church functions. They have sales, they have different functions that go with the children or with the church.
Okay, so those are usually held during the day, or is it?
Yes.
Okay.
And some are at night, but they're small, and they're not loud. But they had one here just recently, this last year, that was it was obnoxious.
Yeah.
I mean, and they say that they can't control it. And the police, I don't like to call the police, I mean, it's a religious facility, and I don't like to call the police to have them come down, and they don't like being there. They don't like being called in. So I say that if you put restrictions on the sound system, would bring a lot. But the cars, too, coming up and down, strangers in the area not knowing where St. David's is, not knowing where the hall is, and like I say, that dirt road, it gets so bad sometimes. The other day I had the fire department came in. I had to beg them not to bring one of their big trucks down because the road is so full of potholes and so narrow, they can't get through. And you could check that out with the fire department. They cannot get through. And if there's cars parked on the side of the street, which there are oftentimes on people's property and tight, they couldn't get a fire truck or an ambulance through there if they tried.
So let me go back to you for a minute. You said that your hours are 10 o'clock because you need some time to break down, et cetera. How long is the music actually going to be playing? Until what?
Till 9:30.
9:30.
From 6:30 to 9:30.
All right. Okay, I think we have somebody else, ma'am, that wants to be heard behind you.
Sorry. Yeah, I didn't know there was anyone behind me.
Good evening, Pat Armstrong. I've handled some functions at the hall, so maybe I can be of help in terms of a couple things. The entrance to Nelson Hall is off of Old Main Street and past the church into the back. It's directly behind the church. So there's not another street exit onto it. So if the directions are given carefully, I would think they could go on. No, they need to be on Old Main Street. We've had, I've been in charge of parking, and I believe there are 80 or 82 spots that are there on the facility. You can double check, but they are under construction with the main house. That might have affected some of the front parking. The parking wraps around the front of the church and on the side as you go in. And there is a system within the building, a sound system. It's more of a PA system, a couple of speakers. It's not like something a band would hook up to. Probably a band would have to have their own amplifier to hook up to that. It holds 102 or 110 people, I believe. That facility does. I hope that's helpful.
Very helpful, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Sir, do you have any concluding remarks? You want to address anything that was said?
Again, I'd like to reiterate that we're a very subdued crowd. Older people have a tendency just to sit at tables and chat, talk. There's actually very little dancing that goes on. Our history through the years, we've been in existence since 1977. Our history with the Barnstable, with St. Mary's Episcopal Church has been nothing but exemplary. No one has complained. We have not had any incidents of any kind. We respect the property that we're on. We respect neighbors, and we respect our environment. And we always try to be good stewards of the event and be mindful of the people around us.
Okay, thank
Make
you.
a motion, we close the public hearing.
We have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay.
Chairman, I make a motion, we approve the applications as presented. I think we've always taken the position in the past that there's no option that the sound stays within the building. However you need to contain it, it needs to be contained within the building. The other thing I would ask is that you're cognizant of the spaces that you have available, and, you know, make sure that the people that are coming know to park only in the parking lot, and when that gets full, then you need to be responsible and make sure that then you cut it off so people aren't parked and disrupting the neighborhood.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Would you be willing, Tracy, to put as part of your motion that there be no parking of vehicles on Fontenot Road?
I'll make a motion, we approve the application with the following caveats, that the sound be maintained in the building, that no parking outside of the parking lot at St. David's Episcopal Church will occur. If you don't have enough spaces, it's my opinion that that's it. You're full. That there's no parking on public roads.
No off-site parking?
No off-site parking.
Are you willing to live with those conditions, sir?
That was very acceptable. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
All right.
And these are one-time things. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully, you'll come back next year. We see a lot of this with neighbors that are concerned for their, their peace of mind and their neighborhood, and typically it turns out very well. So, we'll see how this year goes, and if there's any problems, obviously, next year will be a different story. But I think it's worthy of allowing it to see how it goes.
Thank you for your time.
Hold on,
Appreciate
we're
it.
not
No,
finished
we're
yet.
not done yet. We have to vote.
Oh, I thought you did.
She made a motion that was not voted on. Do we have a second?
I seconded it.
All right. Any further discussion?
I do note of the mailing, on the mailings that occurred, there were 2 Fontenot residents listed, and I believe those 2 people came forward. So, I think there's, I have some concerns based on that. If we have several abutters to a property come forward and raise reasonable objections with regard to public safety in particular, and I become very concerned. I don't like seeing roads potentially clogged and have a problem created with police or fire access or emergency vehicle access. And I would love to have been able to see in person Fontenot Road and see exactly what we're talking about. And so, based on what I've heard so far, I'm not comfortable with the application, even though I understand the group, and I'm very concerned about the neighborhood impact.
Well, if they can't park anywhere but the church parking lot, I'm just trying to make sure we cover all your safety concerns, Norm, in the motion, because I feel like we've addressed them to the best we can.
If it happens, it happens, so.
Well,
I have this.
if it happens, they're in violation of their license, so.
But that doesn't correct the situation if there's an emergency call that can't be made.
That could
All you
happen
have
right
to
now.
have is one instance. They haven't said that they'll have police coverage or some other method of enforcement. They just said, well, we'll park within the spaces. That's not saying they will prevent people from going on Fontenot Road.
I think we're talking about an event with 40 people that we've asked them to make sure that people park in the parking lot. I'm completely comfortable with it.
I have the same concerns Norm has, except I think Tracy's motion addresses those concerns. And I'm prepared to support it, but I'll have to tell you, sir, I'm taking you at your word that there's not going to be any off-site parking, that all the cars are going to be in St. David's parking lot, because if they're not, and you come back here again, I will have a different view if you apply for any future permits.
If anything like that happens, sir, you can put the cuffs on me yourself.
I wouldn't hesitate to do that. Anyone else?
I don't have any questions. I think they've all been
Okay.
addressed.
All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Yes.
All right, so it passes by 3-1 with those restrictions, sir.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you for
your
coming
time.
in.
Appreciate it.
Let me just find the paperwork, Mr. Chairman, on the next one. Okay, that's the,
Moose?
no, it's the Grand Cafe. That's the one I'm looking for. I got the moose here.
I didn't see it.
I didn't see that either. Is it out of order?
It's supposed to be a change of corporate structure and manager. Talked to Linda about it.
Do you want my packet?
I'm just trying to find it. It's probably in here somewhere. You have it?
Yep.
Oh, great. Let me just take a look at this quickly. Okay, anyone here on Grand Cafe? Want to come forward to the table, please?
Okay.
Good evening. You gentlemen want to identify yourselves, please?
Yeah, must be.
My name is Manuel Carti. My name is Luis Hawaii.
Okay. I'll read the legal ad. The Board of Selectmen, acting as the local licensing authority for the town of Yarmouth, has received an application for a change of corporate structure and a change of manager for Grand Cafe Restaurant, Inc., Manuel Carchi, manager. The premise is a single-story, 2,500 square foot residential resident restaurant building with 2 entrances and exits located at 80 Route 28 in West Yarmouth. Hearing will be held on Tuesday, August 7, 2018, in the hearing room at Town Hall, 1146 Route 28, South Yarmouth. The Board of Selectmen meeting begins at 6 p.m. Written comments will be accepted until 4:30 Friday, August 3rd, 2018, in the Selectmen's office at Town Hall. Verbal comments will be accepted at the hearing. All right. So you want to change the manager?
Yes.
And the manager is going to be Mr. Carchi?
Yes.
And you met with Officer Magnuson. Did he meet with you? You want to tell us how that meeting went, Officer?
I met with both Luis and Manuel on April 19th. Manuel tells me he has experience working in Italian restaurants in New York, not in an alcohol management capacity, but he is familiar with restaurant operation. He just completed the TIPS course. My communication with him was much more successful than with Luis. His English is much better. We reviewed the rules and regulations. He indicated that his English was adequate to read them himself. So I think this is a step in the right direction to get a manager in place with better communication skills for this market.
Okay, thank you. Now, the corporate change is Grand Cafe Restaurant, Inc.?
Yes.
And the name was changed on May 3rd, 2018. So is that the name that's going to be on a new license?
I don't have these application materials. They went through Linda.
Okay. It looks like from the Secretary of State's office that the name changes to Grand Cafe Restaurant, Inc. Is that going to be the name now?
Yes.
Okay. What is it called before the change?
It's an LLC. Switching from an LLC to an...
Was it spelling? Is that all it is?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I believe it was a DBA, it was a sole proprietorship under Mr. Pegway's name, and they're turning it into corporate form.
Okay, so that's the change. So we have to approve both, right? Change of manager and change of name? All right. Does anybody in the public want to be heard on this? Seeing none, do I have a motion from the board?
I move to close the hearing.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
I have a question about insurance.
Insurance?
And the bonding, does that transfer, or do we have a new?
He would have to make that change in the insurance certificate. It would have to conform to the name of the business, I would think. And I will follow up with Linda on that. And I know we've had some problems which were essentially, I think that motivated this change, and that was, you know, the owner had some problems with communication that were clearly brought to our attention from the outset, and we forwarded that concern to the ABCC. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we have the change of manager. And then, as Officer Magnuson pointed out, I don't think that typo is the reason, Norm. I think it's just a typo. I think the reason that I can see in these papers is it was a sole proprietorship to a corporate form of ownership here. So, do I have a motion to...
I think based on Officer Magnuson's point about his skills, I think we're much suited in a better position now, understanding we've had this situation before where they don't, you know, the rules and regulations are difficult for them to understand and to convey to employees. So I think if this puts us in a better position, that you understand the rules and regulations and that you can adequately train your staff and make sure everybody is trained and has the proper certification. You're going to the classes that you're supposed to go to. You have all the paperwork that you're supposed to have.
They both came to the compliance on that.
I'll make a motion to approve the application of both the change and
change of manager and change of corporate structure.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, gentlemen, you're all set. Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Next one, I don't think had to be advertised. I don't believe it did.
which one, the Moose
That
Lodge?
was just a change of officers for the Moose Lodge. Is somebody here in the Moose Lodge application? We have two moose. Okay, you gentlemen want to state your names, please?
Eric Jocelyn, Administrator.
Ken Thompson, Junior Governor.
Okay. So, I know we had some issues with, there was a turnover in management, but nothing was squared away with the licensing department here for quite a while, a number of years, I understand. And Linda, our licensing clerk, was on you guys for a very, very long time to get you to come in here and get a change of manager officially approved by the board. And I'm only mentioning that because it's not a something that you should just treat lightly or offhandedly. What could happen in the absence of having an approved manager, you could be in a position really legally of not having a manager, in which case you might not have a license. So you have to keep up with this stuff and make sure that if there is a change, you come before the board and get that approved. That's all I'm going to say about that. So go ahead. What do you want to say? Anything?
No, just that Linda's been very good about contacting us and saying what we need to do. I can only blame myself for not getting things done in a more timely manner. Change of officers I didn't know about at the time, that it had to be done with the change of manager. So that I already came before the board for the change of manager. us revisiting with the change of officers.
Okay. So now, who's going to be the manager of record?
I am.
All right. And again, what's your position in the
I'm the administrator.
administrator of the lodge? All right. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? Officer Magnuson.
This has been an ongoing situation that Linda's been working on since November to try to bring them into compliance. And looking back, I see that there have been changes in the board going back way before that. I was in the process of writing up a letter to the board asking you to suspend the license indefinitely pending getting this straightened out. If we can get it straightened out tonight, I'm all in favor of that, and that's fine. They need to understand that if they have a change of the board or a change of managers, they have to come in and get it approved. And again, the standard disposition before the ABCC is to suspend the license pending approval of the changes when something like this happens. So all the other 65 licensees do a pretty good job of keeping on it. They need to make sure that they can keep on it too.
Thank you. And again, gentlemen, I think that goes to my point earlier. I just wanted to let you know that that could happen if you don't have an approved manager, then really, by rights, you shouldn't be operating. And therefore, the remedy would be to have no license during the time that it took you to get here, which would probably be a month or more. And we wouldn't want to do that, but that's what we would have to do, is shut the place down in terms of liquor sales. So
I just want to make sure, so you've been before us for the change in manager part where your tip certification.
Yes.
yeah, his tip certificate's in here.
It was bounced back by the ABCC because the ABCC found there had also been a change of manager.
Change of manager, that's why.
Okay.
Anyone else have any questions? Do I have a motion?
I move we close the hearing.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Was it a hearing?
It is, well, it's an informal hearing, but it's a hearing. So do we have a motion to approve the change of manager?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? You guys are all set. Thank you for coming in. I appreciate it.
Very much.
Good luck.
Oh, there's Grand Cafe. They got it out of order. Okay, I guess that brings us to 731 Main Street, LLC, DBA Tavern 731.
Do we need a motion to reopen the hearing?
No.
No, we continued, but what I'm going to do is I'll make sure that I announce. I'm going to reread the legal ad too, just to be safe. Good evening. You gentlemen want to identify yourselves, please?
Philip Magnuson from the Yarmouth Police Department.
Attorney Peter Lloyd on behalf of the Tavern and Michael Kane.
Okay, thank you. This matter was continued from an earlier date. I believe we read the ad into the record then, but I'm not certain of that, so I'm going to reread it. It was the Yarmouth Board of Selectmen, acting as a local licensing authority, has scheduled a show cause hearing to determine if the annual all-alcoholic common victualler license held by 731 Main Street, LLC, DBA Tavern 31, located at 731 Route 28, South Yarmouth, Mass., should be modified, suspended, or revoked under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 138, Sections 26 and 63A, Chapter 94C, Section 34, and Section 1.08, subsection C of the Rules and Regulations, Chapter 155 of the Yarmouth Town Code. The hearing will be held on Tuesday, August 7, 2018, in the hearing room at Town Hall, 1146 Route 28, South Yarmouth. board meeting begins at 6 p.m. This hearing was continued to August 7th from June 19th, 2018, as voted 4-0 by the Board of Selectmen. So it is a new ad. I did have to read it because it was referencing today's hearing. Okay, now I understand that you gentlemen have had an opportunity to discuss this case, and you have a suggested resolution.
Yes. This is a both legally and factually complex situation. There are many legal issues involved. At Chief Frederickson's suggestion, we contacted Mr. Lloyd this afternoon, and we were able to arrive at an agreed statement of facts and a proposed agreed disposition, which is within our guidelines and which I think is very fair to everyone and meets, some needs on both sides. It would involve the board making findings on 2 of the charges, dismissing the rest, and a proposed suspension of 6 days. And we have this in writing. Do we have another copy? Okay. 6 days, 2 to be served during some point, during September, and 4 to be held in abeyance. Like a suspended sentence. Held in abeyance, pending no further problems for 2 years, no further problems after tonight. And I can read the language to you. I think this is a very common disposition at the ABCC. If you read the decisions very frequently, there's an agreed statement of facts and an agreed disposition. Paragraph 1 just reviews the fact that 731 Main Street LLC, DBA Tavern 731, holds a common victualler all alcoholic year-round alcoholic beverage license on the premises. Sandra DiGiovanni is majority shareholder and a manager of that limited liability company. Michael Kane is the duly appointed manager of the premises on the license, and that's under Chapter 138, Section 26. Paragraph 4, on January 9th, 2018, at approximately 8:53 p.m., an incident occurred in the parking lot of the premises in which Michael Kane was found unconscious in a parked truck. A substance later determined to be cocaine and fentanyl was found in the truck. Paragraph 5, during the course of the January 9 incident, Sandra DiGiovanni engaged in conduct which hindered a duly appointed agent of the licensing authority in his investigation of the incident. Now, the penalty that we've proposed is both substantial and fair, and again, within our penalty guidelines that we adopted in our rules and regulations. The first paragraph under agreed disposition would be that the Board of Selectmen, acting as the licensing authority, find that Michael Kane violated the Code of Massachusetts Regulations, which is an ABCC regulation, for permitting an illegality on the premises, to wit, possession of cocaine, a Class B substance. We propose that the board impose the following penalty for the violation: a license suspension of 6 days, 2 to be served on a Monday and Tuesday to be specified in the month of September 2008, and 4 to be held in abeyance for a period of 2 years, provided no further violations occur after today. The September date was negotiated. This incident happened on a Tuesday in January. So I don't think it would be fair to impose the suspension during August. September is kind of a shoulder season. It's middle of the road, so it was in between, a Tuesday in November and a Tuesday in August. So that was a matter of compromise, and certainly that our intention is that not be served in conjunction with the holiday weekend, not coming immediately after the Labor Day weekend. So that's the first 2. 3, that the board find that Sandra DiGiovanni hindered a duly appointed agent of the licensing authority. Finding of fact. The penalty for that would be exactly the same. However, it would run contemporaneously with the first penalty. In other words, there's a penalty for each violation, but we're going to let them serve them together. So it's not going to be a total of 12 days, it's going to be a total of 6 days. Again, frequently done in sentencing. It recognizes the severity of each violation, and yet results in a fair punishment for the license holder. And finally, 5, that the board state its concern regarding Michael Cain's conduct and its intention, the board's intention, to reconsider whether his character is satisfactory to the board to continue as manager if there are any further violations at the premises or other conduct on his part affecting character which occur after August 7th. This was the product of negotiation. Again, I think it's a good result. Under Section 26, the character of the manager has to be satisfactory to the licensing authority. So this puts him on notice that there can be no further issues which would affect your judgment on that, and that you will reconsider and bring that matter forward if there are any further issues. Mr. Lloyd has anything to add?
I agree. It's something that we spent the afternoon negotiating at the police department. I've gone over it with both Sandy and Michael. I spoke to Sandy about her involvement in the incident that night, and she wrote a letter of apology to the primary officer, who is the officer that's involved with the hindering, and addressed it to him and all of the members of the Yarmouth Police Department, certainly everyone that responded. I've spoken to Michael about the allegations that are in the police report and the letter of show cause, and he's doing things to address what took place that evening. I had prepared a number of things for the board in that regard, but he showed me that outside of the establishment, it is an event that takes place in the parking lot. He had signs posted that speak to the fact that no alcohol shall be consumed other than which is purchased inside, and it also speaks that no drugs should be consumed in the parking lot, and if anything like that comes about, the police will certainly be notified. Beyond that, I agree with Officer Magnuson. It's something that we spent some time, and I think it's a fair resolution.
Okay. I guess.
Copy of the agreement?
Excuse me?
The copy of the agreement?
I have another copy. I just, unfortunately, I don't have a copy for everybody.
You know, I've got copies that have a typo in the name, but the substance is the same. So if you, the typo was just in the name in the top. There's something in there.
I'll add that
Thank you.
I was contacted this afternoon by the chief, who said that he had Officer Magnuson and Attorney Lloyd at the police department and wanted me to be informed of their agreement. It wasn't spelled out in the level of detail this is, but it was in substance pretty much the same thing. And I indicated to them that, and we all know the board as a whole has got to approve this, but I voiced my opinion that in view of the evidentiary hearings that were raised in this case regarding privilege and confidentiality, which, despite what this board, plus factual, all kinds of different factual issues that would have to be resolved, it could invite appeals to the ABCC and perhaps to the Superior Court after that. And there's no guarantee as to the outcome of this case for the Yarmouth Police or for the business that's involved here. And looking at all of the circumstances of the case, considering the guidelines that we have, I thought it was an eminently fair agreement, and I expressed that to the chief and to Officer Magnuson and Attorney Lloyd. So I fully support this agreement. I think they've done a fine job putting it together. I think it's very fair and appropriate given all the facts and circumstances of the case. And I commend them both for the hard work that they must have put into this in resolving it in short order. Does anyone else have any questions?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, could I speak to the chief outside with some information that was handed to me relative to this conversation and then get back to you?
Sure.
Okay. It's a matter of clarification.
The other thing that I will bring to the board's attention is that in terms of the suspended portion of this license suspension, the 4 days, there would have to be, for that 4 days to be advanced, there would have to be an offense that occurred after today. So if there was a pending matter, which there is, that is under my review at this point, that would not accelerate the other 4 days. And I think that was part of the back and forth that went on between Attorney Lloyd and Officer Magnus. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
That's what I was asking about.
Because I don't want, if there is anything that happens in the future, I don't want there to be any confusion about that. So, while we're waiting for Dan, does anyone else have any
I
questions?
think he's just clarifying that point for me.
Oh, okay.
That was the question that I had.
When did this other matter occur?
I think it was late July. And I'm going to say allegedly occurred because we haven't heard any evidence on it, or, I haven't fully digested it, to be honest with you. And I'm probably going to have some further information provided from Officer Magnuson about it.
Our first hearing was in June, was it not?
The first date, we didn't really have a hearing, Norm. We continued it, but it was scheduled for June 19th. And I think that we had received a letter from Attorney Lloyd that he wasn't available, and also Officer Magnuson had a problem with one of his officers who was not available, and who continues not to be available. So all that went into the equation of this settlement, I'm sure.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I believe we're all set. The question I had is answered to our satisfaction.
Okay. So
So we have to make the two findings?
No, I don't think we have to make the findings. I think what you have to do is accept this statement of agreed facts and agreed disposition.
I think we have to make the findings for them to be able
No,
to
the findings are in the statement of agreed facts.
I think if the board just voted to accept the agreed facts and agreed disposition, I think that covers it.
Yeah,
I
and
put a
then- and
line
that's
there
gonna all
for
be signed.
your chairman, for the licensing chairman to sign. I don't know if that's...
We're all going to sign this. It's going to be signed by Sandra Di Giovanni, Michael Kane, Frank Frederickson on behalf of the Yarmouth Police Department, and myself as licensing chairman.
I'll make a motion to accept the August 7th agreement for the show cause hearing for 731 Main Street LLC as presented to us tonight, the statement of agreed facts and the agreed disposition.
Excellent. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
Why are there no violations, further violations occurring after August 7th as opposed to June, the original hearing?
Because this was agreed upon today. June was just the date they were supposed to come in. They may or may not have reached an agreement back in June. But the facts really originate out of an incident in January, back in January. But the agreement was made today. We really didn't have a hearing in June. We just continued it.
Mr. Chairman, I was not available, so I did not appear, nor did either
No,
of my
you didn't.
clients.
I told you didn't have to.
Right.
And I take care of that.
So for purposes of notice, it was discussed and then continued to tonight.
Correct.
It's not that, I have the same concern, Norm, but Dan's assured me and the chief that this is the proper wording.
Well, again, like I said, there's no saying really how, if you had a hearing on this case, I mean, to be fair, you have to consider all the facts and the law, and there are many complications, as Officer Magnuson pointed out, both legally and factually. And there's no guarantee what the result would be. This way, both sides can kind of hedge their bet, and they can say, we can accept this as a reasonable resolution, and it's frequently done in court cases and at the ABCC level. And again, I think it's eminently fair.
I think the thing that is concerning is it's the after, no violations after today part, that
Well,
in all the sections.
if you did it any other way, you'd kind of retroactively be going behind the agreement and using something that hasn't been dealt with to disturb what's been agreed to here.
Okay, and what are the 2 days that have been agreed upon?
It would be a Tuesday and Wednesday in September.
Monday, Tuesday.
I'm sorry, Monday, Tuesday. A Monday, Tuesday in September, not the holiday weekend. So whoever's got, somebody's got a calendar.
I got one for you. The last Monday and Tuesday is the 24th and 25th. The one before that's the 17th and 18th.
My client's telling me that they'll do it next week if the board accepts the agreement.
That's not September.
Next week?
13th and 14th of August.
You don't really have to do that.
He's volunteering it.
I have no objection. That's what they want to do.
What's he want to do?
13th and 14th of August, Monday and Tuesday.
Is the tavern open 7 days a week?
It's licensed to be open 7 days a week, but it's not.
When is it open?
Open every day except for Monday.
Well, then Monday should not be a day of service.
Sunday.
Sunday, Tuesday. The 12th and the 14th.
12th.
Sunday and a Tuesday.
12th and 14th. Feel better about that, Norm? 12th and 14th?
Yeah.
A little bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll make a
Can we amend the agreement to, instead of line that out and initial it, to show that it won't be,
I've actually got an original here that we're going to use as a signature copy, so Mr. Lloyd's doing that on this original here.
so with that change, can you amend your motion, Tracy, to add that change of the license suspension will be
I think we're amending section 2 to read
12th
to
and
be served
14th?
Sunday and Tuesday, specified in the month of August 2018. I think that needs to be amended as well, both times in that,
It's paragraph 4 also.
yep. And to both say Sunday and Tuesday, the 12th and 14th of August.
Okay, so I'm putting it simply, your motion.
That, I just have a question. We've had this, well, it's agreed upon, so it's not appealable, but last time we didn't give them
Correct.
enough time for it to.
Right, but the difference
wouldn't be
is.
the case in this scenario.
Absolutely, that's a great question. The difference is, this is by agreement.
Okay.
And there's also a waiver of appeal in the agreement.
Okay.
If I could present this to you.
Sure,
I made those changes in 2 and 4.
thanks.
And obviously, they should be initialed by the party signing.
Okay, so now it says, license suspension of 6 days, 2 to be served on Sunday, August, is it 12th, 2018,
And Tuesday, August 14th.
Yeah, I'm looking to see where it says Tuesday, though. It just says August 14th.
Right margin.
I see the August 14th part here. Oh, I see, and Tuesday, and then it goes down. I get it. All right. I'm just going to put a little vector there. Okay, good. Tuesday, August 14th. And then paragraph 4, a license to be 2 days to be served on Sunday, August 12th. and Tuesday, August 14th. Okay, good. So, who made the second? Can we?
I did.
Will you second that with that change?
I will.
Okay, good. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, so that passes unanimously. Why don't you get the signatures, and then I'll sign it, and then hopefully we can get some copies made of it.
Same thing, initial, twice in the front. Initial somewhere. Sign and initial.
Thank you. Okay, done. Thank you very much. I don't know who's we're gonna have to get some copies made of this to give everybody.
There you go.
So I want to thank everybody for their hard work, and I thank the board for their patience in going through this difficult, otherwise difficult hearing and getting it resolved.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Let's go on then with the 2018 wrap-up for golf.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Jim Armentrout, Director of Golf Operations for the town of Yarmouth Golf Courses.
Pat Armstrong, Director of Community Services.
Thanks. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Back on May 6th, when we came before you to discuss golf, we said we would be back in a few months to talk about how the year went and how we're starting to trend for this new fiscal year. I'll say that Mr. Armentrout and his group of staff have worked very, very hard and have done the best they can with the facilities and the weather and other things to bring 2018 to a close, and tonight we'll discuss those specifics, and then at the end I can share with you how we're trending as of July for FY19. And I'll let Jim handle that first part.
We'll begin with the facility improvements. We have completed our two-year improvement project at Bayberry Hills. We've done renovations on tees, bunkers, green surrounds. We've expanded approaches, widened fairways, and upgraded and lengthened our golf cart paths. This resulted in exceptionally good playing conditions. Also done a bit of in-house work at Bass River. We built a new tee on the 5th hole that's been very well received, a forward tee. We plan additional improvements as we go along, primarily in-house improvements. We've worked on our maintenance. The efforts and standards have improved significantly. Scott Gilmore, our new superintendent, has been exceptional. His crew has been really good at both golf courses. Heard nothing but positive feedback at both of them. They're double cutting greens on a regular basis, rolling the greens 3 times plus weekly. The bunkers are machined and hand raked daily. Fairway cuts have been modified, in some areas widening the fairway areas, lessening the contours, keeping the grass in a better playing condition for our clientele. We continue to thin the undergrowth at Bayberry Hills, resulting in opening up corridors and allowing natural grasses to grow on the edges of the roughs and tree lines. This will be an ongoing process. These grasses don't grow overnight. It takes them a little while, but they're starting to come in, and they're looking very good. We're working on our water stations. The grills have done, they did a yeoman's job last year, but we have, to improve our operations, expanded the menu, trying to support quick turnaround at the turn, and providing hot food on a daily basis, fresh baked items available daily. We've worked on holding our prices on the beverages to, excuse me, to stimulate the food and beverage sales and to attract additional people back to the golf courses, thinking they are getting a bargain to not just on the golf, but on their food service as well. We brought in a new manager at Bayberry Hills, Mike Gannon, who is a career restaurant professional, to support our current food and beverage manager, and we've seen a nice improvement there since he's been on board. We've also gotten our beverage cart back on the courses for the fall, for the shoulder seasons, which will be very important. The Bass River Grill continues to improve. Heather Gatchell, our food and beverage manager, has done an exceptional job with that operation. Pat's been instrumental in helping her with that as well. Had nightly specials introduced in the spring. Coordinated marketing as a function facility with the Flax Pond operation has attracted some events and will continue to do so. We're preparing to expand the entertainment to include a license for outside music. Have a hearing here before you guys here shortly. Planning a jazz brunch starting in September, and we're beginning to work on bookings for holiday parties. Our marketing efforts, we have worked closely with the Yarmouth Chamber. They have been extremely helpful in our marketing efforts. We've scored multiple positive articles in regional and national golf magazines about our renovations projects. We've had Golf for Two vouchers on a local radio promotion on the Friday Marketplace show. Had a great article in the Cape Cod Times featuring our project and our efforts to improve our service and our facilities. We're looking at upcoming ads on Red Sox, Yankees, and Red Sox Toronto games, and also on the PGA Championship, major championship event coming up this week. We've also increased use of our website provider, CyberGolf, keep expanding our email lists. We've offered midweek off-peak discount specials, reintroduced a program for golf free for youths with adults. We've continued our Bayberry Hills putting competition, our Sunday Nine and Dines at Bass River, and in the fall we're developing a program for female business professionals to encourage them to get involved in the game and at our courses. We also at Bass River, I think I'd mentioned this previously, but we hosted a top-tier MGA Ladies Championship that went exceptionally well in the springtime. In the golf shops, we're developing new relationships with our vendors, working on expanding product offerings, emphasizing affordable pricing and reduced costs. We're expanded our women's golf item selection, including logoed goods. We're looking at adding some fall outerwear and, excuse me, cold weather gear for holiday sales. We're considering looking at league requests for additional tee times due to expanded demand. We're getting a few, our sign-ups are increasing for the annual fee players. We also addressed ongoing phone and internet problems, which have plagued us for several years, but I think we've finally gotten a handle on them. Our year-end budget, we looked at final revenues of $3.4 million, expenses at about $3.6 for a deficit total of $222,000. Now, we looked at years back, our budget, our original budget was for a $110,000 loss for that year because we knew we were still working on our improvement projects. So the fact that we had a deficit wasn't excuse me, a great surprise. And then we had a couple of retirements that kicked in another $75,000 in costs, as well as a $50,000 increased health insurance. So all that in the mix, the last couple months of the year helped us get back toward the surface, and the ATM supplement of $61,000, the enterprise reserve of $98,000, and some net metering credits that from years past had got us back to a level that we could sustain. Pat has some info on the current year.
I do, but if you'd like to stop now on the 18-year, and I can answer any questions before we move on. We don't want to mix, if that's more of a confusion, or I'll just continue, whatever's to the board's desire.
Go for it.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I have a question. I'm confused about the one that you had here, the numbers, the deficit 222.
Is that 19 or 18? That's 19 that I handed you extra.
Yeah, but you had FY 18 here in it. The numbers don't match the FY 18 year end that was in the packet.
The FY19.
I believe the 61, or what we had at town meeting, is the difference. I think she put in that
Between the-
change already.
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
222, 207, minus 156, 950, 965, 65, 242.
This was Anita's point, and that's what I had.
This was
So that's 217, 965, which isn't 222. Gross.
Okay, in any event.
That's the difference. So we brought in that 61. So I had hoped that these numbers would be a little closer, but they weren't. But as we, I have to say that in anticipation, I I didn't do myself any favors at our last meeting, and one of the things that I said to you is that there was no excuses, and we had to start creating an atmosphere that was more like Disney World, and there would be no more dirty bathrooms, and no more grumpy cart cleaners, and no more dismissive counter staff, and all of the cart cleaners and the dismissive and the counter staff are not very pleased because they feel the job that they do is excellent. And now that I've been there for the last 2 months, I must say that I was mistaken to have said such a thing publicly, and I publicly apologize to that staff because I've seen nothing but people being accommodating and pleasant and attentive and going out of their way to help people. So I'd like to make that apology present and formally here, because I'm very pleased and very proud of the work that they're doing over there, and they're working very hard. These numbers are our new numbers from our July end of month budget. The golf operations in 2018 in July made $444,563, and this year we're at $472, a difference of $28,000, or about 0.6% above. Along with that, our memberships actually have grown another 9,700, or up another 55%. That's probably, if you look at that, about 11 or 12 full members that paid in. And then our operational expenses have been reduced by 110,000. That's down 15%. So this year, for July, the golf operation lost $49,000 between expenses and income, where last year it lost $189,000, rounded up. That's a significant reduction of about $140,000, or 74%. So the efforts to reduce that money has been made, and is going pretty well. In terms of the restaurants, you'll see that in 2018, for the month of July, the revenues were $81,591. This year they're $90,306. So that's an increase of about $8,700, or a 10% increase for just the month of July in the revenues. And the expenses, again, in 18 were $33,986. This year they're $29,717, a difference of $13,000. So we've reduced our expenses 38.5%. And then the wages were $16,000 and change in 18. They're $15,782, just about the same, 1 to 2% of a reduction. So altogether, the contribution this year for restaurants towards the bottom line for July only is $53,600, where last year it was just $31,500. So that's a difference of $22,000 that the restaurants are contributing. And if you do all of those plus and minuses down the line, in July, in fiscal 2018, there was a deficit of $157,000, and this year there's a net gross of the net of $4,550 that we're putting that we've covered all our expenses, and that's in the black going forward into August for the first time in a long time. So we've made some changes. We've cut expenses and continue to in the new fiscal year. We've improved our product, not only our golf product, but our restaurant product. We've put some, as Jim explained, we put some events that were blocked out and wanted to use the LaRusso Lodge at Flax. We connected them with the Bass River facility, and we had some weddings and some rehearsal dinners and some retirement dinners. We've improved, as I said, and we would do the products in our pro shops so that people would be considered to buy more as gifts, especially if something had a logo on it. Our visitors like to have a logo that says they played Bass River, they played Bayberry Hills, they played on Cape Cod. We've made that change. We found a new embroiderer that would make those logos happen at a 50% less rate than we were presently using, with a contract that we did through the Park and Rec Department with a group off Cape. And we're working hard to continue to grow, knowing that we're still got a lot to catch up on. So there's no wild spending. We didn't wait till July 1 and spend like crazy. We have been careful of what we're purchasing, and we're looking at all the different bidding and all the different contracts and the state bid works and all the other contracting groups to see if we can get our products as affordable as possible, and our staff is still working with less staff than last year in terms of maintenance of the courses, and we're getting tremendous compliments about the quality of the courses. We're working using social media as well as some of our other media to get the word out that the courses are available. And I have to say that our friends at the Chamber have been exceptionally helpful in helping us expand our marketing, and they are being true partners to the town in the work that we've asked them to do. From layout and print magazines to social media and tweeting and Facebook posting and boosting and things I'm learning all sorts of things about. But Jim and his staff stepped up. They heard the call. They've done a great job. I've had a privilege of working very closely with them, and I think they're on the right trajectory.
Good news.
I know it's scary, isn't it? It's good news. We're very pleased.
Mark, you have any questions?
Just help me understand, Pat, when you're looking at the budget period, it's just a little bit confusing to me. 2019, 2018?
That's actually FY18 and FY19.
Okay, all right. So that's for the entire year?
That's for the month of July.
July only.
The month of July.
Yeah, we're just getting started. That's our first.
That's why FY19 July budget report. So it's FY19 compared to FY18 for July only.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
Because it's a $3.3 million
Yeah.
budget revenue in.
I know when we've talked about this before with the weather, Jim has always mentioned that the weather has a lot to do with how things go in terms of the course. I would assume the weather that we've had this year has probably had a real benefit, would you say?
It's been positive, yes. We have not lost any weekend days. That's the big thing on.
Do you think that's a factor as well in terms of the revenue numbers, Jim?
Oh, absolutely. It's certainly helpful.
Yeah.
Although we had a pretty good July last year weather-wise as well. The month of June was at the last month of last year was problematic.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
understand.
you live by the weather and you die by the weather.
Yeah.
And last summer was horrible. If we remember July and August
Right.
last summer, there was a lot of rainy weekends.
Right. No, Jim was very clear. This has come up quite a bit, and it's obvious that things are certainly going in the right direction. So I know there's a lot of work going on within the golf department and with all the staff, with all the employees. You're right. These are all trending in the right direction. This is good. This is good information. This is great to see, and so.
Thank you.
Let's keep this going.
I'd just like to reiterate what Mark said. Obviously, the trends are in the right direction, and I'm encouraged that we have some positive numbers on the July report based on this year versus last year. You seem to be approaching this from a variety of different angles, which is good. It seems to be a lot of marketing that's going on, and combining other recreational opportunities with the restaurants and things like that, which I think is creative and I think will yield some positive benefits going forward. One question I had in that regard, you mentioned like people are having parties and functions and things, private events. What hours typically, Pat, do they do that during?
We tend
like
to
6 at night to
8.
whatever?
We tend to close the restaurants at 8, sometimes 9 depending on the function. And they tend to do meals along with alcohol. There's always food involved, so I always try to use what you've set for like the social clubs, where 2/3 of the bill should be food-based, and the rest and the other balance should be alcohol. So we're doing small retirement parties. We did 4 teachers retired for Ezra Baker School, and the whole school and everyone was there. So there was 50 people out on the deck on a Friday afternoon after school until 6. Where others, we had a wedding rehearsal dinner that was there until 9 who were 2 members of the club that were getting married, and so they rented and they were out there. Most of the time it's a shared venue between the rental and the club members, but sometimes we've had to close the deck once or twice, which has been disappointing for some of the members, but we try to give them forewarning so that they don't come up to have dinner and find that they can't go on the deck. We've never had to turn anyone away. It was just to the deck that might not be available.
And I think the, having logos with off-season clothing is a very good idea, because if people like to commemorate a particular location, it's not that, even though they're golfers, they probably might want to wear the colors in the fall too, or perhaps in the winter. So I think that's a very good idea as well. You should have some success there, I think.
One of the other things we're going to try to do is in the fall, we want to try to do some competition between the colleges during fall football season. So we'd like to, have some of that competition, the ACC teams against each other, and gather some of the local alumni associations. We've heard they do that in other locations, and it's great fun. So, we might have the Eagles against someone else at ACC.
And I'm glad to hear that the Chamber is helping you out. They're a great organization. They do wonderful work, and I'm sure that maintaining a partnership with them long-term is going to be very beneficial.
Thank you, yes.
Joyce?
I think one of the things that, and I know Dan was saying that you were working on it, is I like to see the restaurant wages, income and expenses separate here. It would be nice to see them by course. Same thing with Pro Shop. I think it's really important. The information that you put into the system and the information you get out really tells a story about where, your profit loss is. So
we actually break all that out. We just, information overload is.
No, I understand, but I think, to be able to really make hard decisions about where the money is, it's important to really see, which restaurant or which Pro Shop is.
Yeah, I would, add one thing that I think we've alluded to, but we really hadn't. I think we would like to emphasize that over the past 13 months, the restaurants collectively, and primarily the Bass River restaurant, but the Bayberry Hills restaurant as well, have contributed an additional $90,000 to the bottom line, which is, I think significant. It's a lot of that is Heather, Pat's had a lot to do with it as well, but we've, I think we're got that trajectory moving in the proper direction as well.
We have those breakdowns. I can provide those for you.
Yeah, no, I just mean, just as far as, there was, I don't know if that's new, but there was a time where that information wasn't really being kept separate, so I think it's important to keep all that. So I think when, we're looking at different decisions that might have to be made, I think it's important to be able to
Exactly.
see.
We have food costs for both separated, everything through, even though they share the same vendor, we order separately for each location so that we can attach the bills to each location appropriately.
I've been getting your emails. I've been really impressed with the outreach that has occurred, all the information, all the stuff that's going on. I love to see the youth back with the adult. I know that, for my son, that's how he got introduced to golf, and that's what kept his love. I mean, I think he's still a member, I'm not sure, but he was for a while, and he enjoyed playing golf, and without having that exposure, he probably never would have picked it up. So projects like that is good. And data, as far as like those members that are coming back.
The consultant has all of those numbers for the past 5 to 8 years, and we're going to get a report on how many rounds are played by members, how many are greens fees, what members play how many rounds a year.
Right.
A lot of data breakdown that we can do through CyberGolf and the Chelsea system more. That's our reservation system.
Great. Well, hopefully it stays on this path. Let's hope. I know you guys have put a lot of work into it, and your staff, and it's very appreciative.
It's the staff a lot. Thank you.
A lot of good people.
Yeah.
And if Chappie asks me one more time for a raise, I don't know what I'm going to do, so I think you should consider that.
That's why we keep sending them your way, that's why.
Chappie who? Ooh, I'll get a call tomorrow on that one.
Mr. Chairman, can I just say one other final thing? One of the things that happened earlier that really struck me is amazing, is the interaction between the golf team, let's say, and the zoning board over how to deal with finding ways to generate revenues at Bass River. And the whole idea of maybe having some form of entertainment properly managed could help provide a benefit. And it was clear to me watching the zoning board hearing that it was going to be a difficult issue, and it didn't look like it was going to work out. But the cooperation and the involvement, the collaboration between the golf team and the zoning board, you folks coming up with an opportunity to try something out, giving the residents an opportunity to come and listen. I found that collaboration, that whole experience to be quite amazing. It was very professional. People listening to each other and sort of working together to figure out a way to move forward. So I think, and I was very impressed with the way in which the zoning board handled it and how they dealt with it. So it was just a whole, it mattered that didn't take that long, but there was an intense amount of activity in a very short period of time. And I think everybody came together to find a way to work things out and trying to address some of the concerns. So I just wanted to point that out. I was very impressed with the way you all handled that, and I was very proud of the way in which the zoning board handled it as well. I thought it was an incredibly collaborative effort, very professional, and very respectful of the community. So well done on that one as well.
Thank you.
It's great news, and you know, I think I've shared my pleasure with the golf course conditions. It's been a great spring, summer. All three courses, the blue course as well as Bayberry and Bass River, are in great condition, and I don't think I've seen better, and it shows in all aspects of play. People are still moaning about the length of the the grass in some areas, but it's
does have to grow in.
If you stay in the fairway, you're in great shape.
That's right.
I have a question about the golf operating expenses, because a 15% change is significant. Is that a change in philosophy? Is it, what is it?
It's skewed slightly by last year, and I alluded to that in last year's talk. But we had a couple of retirements last year, and the
expenses are in that
is in wages for the for the month.
All right.
Unfortunately, I don't think you're going to see that on a regular basis. But
Well, I mean, some people might conclude from this that we cut back on cutting this or that, or and so I'm glad to hear that it's something.
That is attributable to.
Okay, that's fine. That's good. So, I think over weekends, and I don't play much on weekends. I've been, one or two times, and the thing I do hear more about is rangers, and we ought to do that. We ought to have more rangers, is what the people keep saying, and they get aggravated with the speed of play. But
it's a tough subject. One, a lot of the people that fuss about the speed of play are the guys that play during the week. And when they play on the then when they play on the weekend, when you got half again as many people out there, it just doesn't go as fast. And
the other thing is, by the time you hear about it, all you need is for one group to lose one hole of play, and you've affected a whole bunch of people. And by the time you're able to respond to it, they're well on their way. So.
I have found in my numerous years of experience that everybody loves a ranger until he comes up to talk to them, and that's it's tough. I have found over time that I do have individuals that where's your ranger, but I've had in the past where we really emphasized pace of play and had two rangers on each side, and everybody's got to finish in less than 2 hours, and they didn't like that very much either. So it's
I would like
there's a good balance.
Hard balance to make.
I would like to add that we understood the ranger was an important part of it, and we actually asked one of our full-time professionals if they'd be willing to take on that role on the weekends. And the GPS and the carts allow us to see where holdups are happening, so we don't need to hear about it. We can actually see it on our control screen in the pro shop.
Yeah.
So Fred Guido has been a great sport and has really understands. He does a lot of our set up for tournaments. He was a PGA professional, and so he's gone out there, and at Bass River, we have him focused 5 days a week that he's on through the weekend. And I think it's changed the pace a bit at Bass River, which is mostly a slower rate of pay than you find at Bayberry. But I know that Keith MacArthur, who's on the weekends over at Bayberry, watches that, and when we start seeing reds on the chart on the GPS, he loves to jump in his cart, and off he goes to encourage people to move on. So hopefully that helps.
Okay. Well, it's good to hear. It's interesting that there's a technological way to manage that, and that's good in itself. So
yeah, the next thing we're doing that we had complaints was about positioning of the pins and where they are on the greens, and we actually have a setup for 5-day rotation, and you could see that on the GPS. So we're going to have to train people how to use the GPS. You can actually tell if the pins forward, center, or back from the GPS. Correct?
That's good. That's good. Making people aware that the course is watching from a technological standpoint might take some of the pressure off the comments of, well, I don't see rangers out there. Well, you don't see the people, but
they see you.
The management is aware of what's going on the course, and I think that might be worth some communication with people.
Communication's our next big thing.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great progress.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go on to the DPW Building Committee charge. Jeff
I've
Colby.
asked Mr. Colby to address this issue related to his project and give you a quick update on it. There had been some commentary from folks in the community about building committee, so Jeff was kind enough to put this charge together.
Yes, good evening. Jeff Colby, Public Works Director. And just a little bit of history for those that might be just tuning into this item. But last year, we had a feasibility study that was done and determined the needs associated with the facility and kind of developing a rough cost and, a process forward for us. And based upon that feasibility study, the annual town meeting approved design funds as well as funds for an owner's project manager. In keeping that process moving forward, we recently released a request for qualifications and RFQ for that owner's project manager, and I'm happy to report that on Friday when those were due, we had 8 responses, so we have a good variety to choose from. We'll get the team together and we'll review those responses and hopefully come up with a real solid owner's project manager to help us shepherd this project forward. That is required by law to have an owner's project manager for a project of this size, and once that project manager is on board, we will then focus on bringing a designer on board and keeping that project moving forward. So with that said, that's a brief overview of where we are. The next step is to have a building committee in place that will help us with the heavy work that is ahead of finalizing design and the needs associated with the building and really keeping that moving forward, and then ultimately bringing that forward to the selectmen and then ultimately town meeting and the voters. So with that said, working with the assistant town administrator, we put together this charge. It's based upon what a few other communities have done for their building committees. This is all, it's a draft, so it's all subject to discussion and your input and what you'd like to see on that committee. But with that said, it looks like a number of the communities, we're looking at a number around 7. That's a number that's a little bit easier to get a quorum, but that number certainly could be 5, it could be more, it could be less. I know in working through this project over the last year or two, we've had a lot of interest from the Capital Budget Committee, and so having representation from that committee I think was important. And then also this board has expressed interest, and we've heard from others as well, that having knowledge with the building and construction trades, designers, that type of thing would be an important presence on the committee as well. So that's tentatively what we have drafted here in this charge as far as representing that committee. With that said, the charge is relatively basic and gives an overview of responsibilities for the project all the way through construction, dealing with some of the change orders and evaluations that are needed as part of that process.
I have just 2 quick comments. Thank you for your work on this. One of the things I think it says in terms of membership, this committee consists of at least 7 members. I think it should say 7 members. Well, at least, yeah, not more than. One being the Director of Public Works, and I think it should say a minimum of 2. It says 2, but I think a minimum of 2. It could have more than 2 with experience in building and construction. And then the other comment would be the completion. The term of this charge should be through the final construction of
Absolutely.
the building until the project's complete.
Okay. Other comments?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, yeah, I support the charge. I think it's well done. It's well written. I'm pleased to see in the description of the specific charges, it makes it very clear that the committee will actually be responsible for approving change orders and be involved during the whole process of construction. I think that's a very thoughtful and smart way to go. And reviewing payment requisitions during construction. So having this committee involved during the construction process is fine. I think it's great. The number of committee members, I'm very comfortable with that. I've noticed. I think that's. And I'm comfortable, quite frankly, with saying at least 7. We may actually surprise ourselves and find out there's a wealth of experience above that number that actually comes out of the woodwork. I've heard from a number of people who have expressed interest in it. So, I mean, you may actually have a strong, this could be one of those committees where people come out and you may have 9 really talented, very helpful people that could be involved in this exercise. Then again, it could have just ended up with 7. So I'm comfortable with that language being written the way it is. And so I would be very supportive of this and would move it when it's appropriate. With obviously the language that to clarify, as Tracy said, that the committee will be working during the construction period. I think that language is, it's sort of implied by the way in which it's written, but it's certainly worth stating expressly.
I was just thinking about the consistency with our other charges. Typically, we give it, if it's an ad hoc committee or if it's a regular committee, most of them they go on forever. So this really is specific to the completion of the project being built.
I would agree with that. I think that's good.
Okay. Mike?
I agree with Mark. I think the language of at least 7 is fine because you may get people with engineering background, architectural background that you may not have a spot for them if you have a limitation of 7, but they might have unusual and very much in point experience to have them added on. If you only get 7 qualified people, I'm assuming you're not going to go out hunting for people just to increase your numbers. I do, though, like Tracy's suggesting that you have a minimum of 2 with some knowledge of building and construction or the trades, because out of 7, that basically gives you a minority position without adding other, you have 5 others that ostensibly may not have those qualifications. So I think at a minimum you would want to have at least 2. So I would leave that open if you perhaps could have 3 or even 4, depending on who volunteers. And so I think that's a good amendment. And I also think at the end of the word, performance monitoring, to pick up on Tracy's suggestion, you could put until completion of the project. You could add those words right after that, and I think they would fit right in. So back to Mark's point, I think it's very concise, but I think it covers really the scope of what we would want the charge to do.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm fine with the amendments that have been suggested, and I like the fact that it's concise. I also like the fact that the specific charge is broad enough to allow the committee to have some significant impact if need be, and so Do we need to act on this evening, or are you going to come back with changes?
I think the changes that have been discussed this evening are relatively minor. I think it would be good if you were able to act, because we can start to fill these positions and get them to the appointment chair as quickly as possible, just to continue the momentum of the project.
So I'll make a motion then that with those amendments, we approve the charge for the DPW Building Committee.
I'll second that.
Okay, further discussion? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, good to go.
All right,
Thank you,
thank you.
Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right. Okay, committee appointments.
Okay. Grab one of those and pass that down. What I'd like to do this evening is to take up, I think we all received a memo from the town administration regarding the Water Resources Advisory Committee. Let me just ask, I know this information wasn't in our packet. I don't know the fact that if it wasn't in our packet, that's an issue for any of the board members. I know some folks, I mean, if it is, then...
I've seen this before, though, somewhere. You must have been on...
I sent it by email last week.
I've seen it.
Yep.
Okay, good. I wanted to...
I recognize, some of the names here, and I recognize the fact that you started out with ex officio members.
Yep.
I remember seeing this document.
Okay, good. Now, for the folks that may be paying attention at home, the purpose of this committee, it's the Water Resources Advisory Committee. Its general purpose, and this is from the charge that the board has approved, it's to investigate ways to involve and educate the community on issues related to water resource initiatives in Yarmouth, including water supply, surface water, groundwater, stormwater, and wastewater, with the goal of protecting and restoring the town's fresh and salt water bodies and its drinking water supplies. So it has a very broad water resources protection charge. There also, it's important to understand that the terms of the members are staggered. So tonight what we're going to have to do is it's a 9-member committee. 2 members are appointed at large. We have 3 that are ex officio. That means they come from various committees that we have designated. So there's one from the Health Board, the Conservation Commission, and the Planning Board. And then there are 4 members that represent all of the saltwater embayments, freshwater lakes, ponds, and waterways. The idea, and this is sort of taken from the Water Resources Advisory Committee charge from the town of Barnstable, and there's one other town, I believe Falmouth. And what other towns are finding, that it's important to involve stakeholders in those watershed areas that have been delineated by the Cape Cod Commission and our own team, because of their awareness and understanding of not just the issues there, but also some of the civic groups in that area that are very interested in this. And this is thought to be a way in which we can sort of spread the word and better educate people throughout our community. So you have those 4 members, and then there's 3, like I said, from the ex officio, and then 2 at large. And then the terms are staggered, like I said. So and that's in the charge as well. An equal number as possible shall expire each year. So in the memo that's before you, we've broken them down into different categories that relate to the categories identified in the charge. And what I'd like to do is to go through each category and propose acting on the candidates for each of the categories. So how are we doing so far? Any questions?
Good.
Okay. So, for example, I would like to move that we appoint Lee Rowley, Tom Durkin, and Paul Bryan for 3-year terms on this committee expiring August 2021. Do I have a second?
I just have a point of clarification that
Please.
typically the ex officios are appointed by the board for a 1-year term, because you may be appointing them now longer than their term on the original board.
That's true. Would you prefer that we appoint them for 1-year terms?
It's typical that what happens is, like I know on the planning board for all the years, every year we would do a new slate of assignments.
Yep. I'm very happy with
Well, let me ask this question. If one of these people did not serve on the board or commission that they were on, would that necessarily disqualify them from this?
Yes.
Yes, it would.
It would, okay,
Yeah.
then.
They're the representative,
Yeah,
they're
okay.
a representative
Of
of
their
that.
respective board.
So then I would agree there should be one-year appointments.
So what we could do is we could make those 1-year appointments, make the watershed area members 2-year appointments. We could make the 3-year appointments at large. How does that, is that acceptable to the board?
Watershed would be 2,
Yep.
and then at-large
The at-large
3.
would be 3-year appointments. Although we have a 4th member in the watershed category, so the number 4 I would put in the 3 slot for the 3-year term. So I can go through each of these individually.
So you take number 4 in the watershed and
Rob.
put them in with the at-larges?
Yep.
Okay,
How's that sound?
that sounds good.
Okay. So I would move that Lee Rowley, thank you, Tracy, Lee Rowley, Tom Durkin, and Paul Bryan be appointed for 1-year terms
As their board designee.
as their board designee, thank you, expiring August 2019.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries. The next group is the watershed area members, and we'll take the first 3. I move that we appoint Tom Roach, Lisa Cody, and John DeLiso for 2-year terms expiring August 2020.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. And at the end, for 3-year terms, I move to appoint Rob Angel, Irene Rennie Hammond, and Kurt Sears for 3-year terms on the committee, the Water Resources Advisory Committee, expiring August 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Say what?
Sorry, I got caught up here, tongue twisted.
Say
I think I've had too much chocolate. I have to send this to the back
Just want to
room.
make sure I said what you
Yeah.
wanted me to.
Yeah, I saw the looks I was getting with my eating. This is my dinner right here, by the way.
Likely story.
Yeah, so the motion carries. Thank you. So that concludes our business with the Water Resources Advisory Committee. And I think for clarification, the key staffers that will be working with this group will be Jeff and I think Rich Bienvenu. So just so that as this group gets going and as we work with them, those will be the 2 principal staffers. So thank you for that. The next item under committees is to accept with gratitude and appreciation for all their work. Adam Joy is resigning from the recycling committee.
Accept with thanks.
I'm sorry?
Accept with thanks. Make a motion.
Accept with thanks.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carries. The next item on appointments. This is a busy night for me. We have 2 slots for reappointment on the planning board. So I'm asking for the board to approve the reappointment of Mr. Brad Goodwin and Mr. Tom Barron, who is ever present, as members of the Town of Yarmouth's Planning Board for 3-year terms, which will run through July 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. And the last item, one of my favorites, the tree warden. So I am looking for the board to appoint Mr. White.
I've never seen this come before us
Yeah.
before as a committee appointment.
This came up briefly in a discussion that we had with the DPW director. I think for more background, if the board's interested in calling up Jeff, if there are any questions, but this is something that we do have to take up. Jeff has done the staff work on it, and I think I like the trend, me personally, I like the trend of doing intermunicipal agreements with other towns. We do this with, weights and measures. We do this in some other areas.
We've agreed to that already, but in terms of the actual appointment, is that an administrative appointment?
No, I believe it's an appointment by statute by the Board of Selectmen. Correct me if I'm...
You're absolutely correct, yes.
Even though, is this gentleman a citizen of Yarmouth? He doesn't live in the town of Yarmouth, right?
He has all the proper certifications, which I think are in your packet. He does not live in Yarmouth, no.
Yep.
It's not a committee appointment.
No, I know. That's
Exactly,
weird. Usually
yeah.
these come on committee.
But sometimes the way some of the state statutes are written, sometimes there are certain officials that we literally have to appoint as a board, as our appointee. So it's just the way the statute reads. So with that in mind, I would like to appoint Mr. White. I guess I said that. And did we have a second?
Second.
Second, Mike, second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The trees thank me. Thank you.
Looking forward to our upcoming agenda. 2 weeks from now, August 21st. Any comments on that agenda at this stage?
I see the Barnstable water agreement's coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah, on that one, I hope to have a signed copy from the manager in Barnstable to present to you, so that's pending, actually, so.
Okay.
What's the committee handbook about? Just on the August 21st agenda.
Well, I think one of the things, if I could just jump in, I didn't put this on the agenda, but I do think we need to have a discussion about the committee handbook.
It's been on the upcoming agenda items for
Yeah.
about a year, so.
At least, yeah. When I came on the board in May of
Take time.
the last May, I've been asking for some discussion about updating our committee handbook. So apparently there must be somebody in the town manager's office that actually is rewriting or updating the current handbook. Can I assume that?
That's a correct assumption.
That's great.
So we've been working to develop a committee handbook, an orientation guide, as well as a resource guide for committee members for the town. We are working through final revisions in conjunction with department heads' feedback. We plan to present you that draft on the 21st, well, in advance of the 21st, but for conversation and discussion and feedback from the board on the 21st, and we hope to finalize it shortly thereafter.
That's terrific. That's going to be a big help, particularly for me and my job in terms of recruiting and getting people to serve on committees. We'll actually have something that we can give them that gives them some idea of what their obligations are of someone who serves on a committee.
And we'll try to get this to you as soon as possible, so you have it in advance of the 21st.
Great, thank you.
The other one that I'd point out is Mr. Richard Brady from Matrix Company will be here, the police and fire efficiency study. That promises to provide a lot of information to you. We will send that document out to you very shortly. If not,
I can send it this evening or tomorrow?
In preparation. It's a rather lengthy read. There is an excellent executive summary for both departments, so that kind of boils it down. But we wanted to make sure you had enough time to go through it thoroughly. And then at that evening, I anticipate Mr. Brady will go over his review, questions that you have for that, and then what we can do is at a later date potentially bring the chiefs back to talk about how they plan to implement it. And we've been working with them all along on these recommendations, but it probably it was a big undertaking, and to give it its justice it needs, to not have anything else interfere with that would be good, because he's very thorough. His team was excellent. He went over a lot of ground with them, a lot of detail, and I know he's anxious to share the results with you.
Good.
The other one is on the 28th of August. I'd bring to your attention. So, fuel efficiency vehicle policy, if we want to get in position for an October submission to the Green Communities Program, we have to adopt a fuel efficiency vehicle policy. I know we've queued up in draft form a vehicle, if you will, replacement policy. Hybrid vehicles and electric vehicles have added a little bit of a quirk to that. because they have a more rigorous change-out schedule, depending upon how you procure those. So typically with leased battery cars, you're looking for a 3-year life cycle because the leases are typically 3 years and you don't want to hang on to them after that. Hybrids can go up to about 10 years before a battery change-out. So we're making some adjustments to that before we present it, but the part that has to be done by the board, for at least for green communities, is just a fuel efficiency vehicle policy, which basically is, to give you a background tonight, is an F-150 today, a 1500 series pickup truck, half-ton, brand new today, would fit within the parameters of that policy. Vehicles with a gross vehicle weight over 8,500 pounds are exempt, so you don't have to worry about that, as are emergency vehicles. However, that being said, the new generation of police cruisers are going to the hybrid model, and Ford is going to be issuing those hopefully sooner rather than later, but those will have a higher level of fuel efficiency as well than what we were used to anticipating.
They got the
with
juice they need to do
Explorers.
the job, though?
They do, but the problem is Ford's got to retool their manufacturing capabilities. So Mike Bryant, when he's here, can give you some more detail. There's going to be a period of time where we will not be able to take custody of any cruisers that are ordered because the entire cruiser line by Ford is being shut down while it turns over, and it's going to be a while. Mike's got a lot of detail on that, but we are a little bit concerned that it could be up to 24 months before we take possession of another cruiser after Ford shuts down their plants. So just kind of a, Chevy and Ford used to have cruisers available. Chevy had the Caprice model for years.
That's going back in the day.
It is, but when you had two vendors, two manufacturers providing, you didn't run into these problems. And there are a few options to get a smaller size cruiser, but we haven't had really good luck with that with outfitted patrol officers. So that is going to be a concern for sure going forward.
Mr. Chairman, there's an item that I'd like to pitch for maybe giving some consideration to maybe in the fall. The town has a lot of road work that's coming down the pike. You got Bass River Bridge, you've got South Yarmouth Village, and then Parker's River Bridge. And I think it might be helpful, maybe after Labor Day, that perhaps we get an update from the DPW director or others that the town administrator might recommend, just to give the board kind of an overview of the scheduling these projects, sort of conceptually what some of the designs are, how they look. I'm not sure we need to bring in Mass DOT into the meeting. I think we have enough information in-house to at least get briefed on just these projects and how they sync up. I think I've heard in the community there is some concern that just how these are scheduled and how they all link together, and to what degree we might have literally, for an extended period of time, large sections of 28 just sort of tied up with construction signs and so forth. So I think the benefit of the meeting and the briefing could be just to kind of update the board on how things look, how things sync up, how they queue up, and whether or not there's any concern on the part of town staff.
I'd add Route 6A to that, too.
And Route 6A, very good. I just think, and I think the meeting itself not only will be helpful for us, but I think generally for the public at large that might be following or paying attention, to get a sense of just, how these are scheduled and how they might be impacted. So.
Okay. Any other comments, additions to the agenda? I do have a couple of things. We had talked with Chamber of Commerce about a meeting.
Yep.
And we should have it at least on the list of things that we're planning, if not a specific date assignment.
So we met with, Mr. Chairman, we met with Mary Vilbon, the director of the Chamber, last week to determine a date to schedule that and also talk about particular areas that she would like to address.
Okay.
So we're still working that through, and we'll hopefully have something on the agenda by the next time we meet.
Okay. Also, the state DEP was going to schedule, and I think we probably have to follow through with them, a public meeting with regard to Vineyard Wind.
Yeah, the MIPA program?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, talk about what that involves and the technical process.
Understood. So we'll look to schedule something like that, hopefully in later end of September. We have to reach out to them.
All right. Now that the legislative session is winding down, I don't know what the best timing for getting our state reps back in to talk with them
Careful
about
what you ask for.
Yeah, I would, because it's an election year.
future agenda items for them that we would appreciate. But I think probably when does the legislature ramp up again?
Well, the session's done the 31st of July, but so
Right.
they're in kind of like informal session
Right.
period.
Should wait
and
till
so they're
after
all
the
running for
election.
Yeah, I would wait till after the election, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman. I think
So really,
I think it complicates their lives and our lives if we do
if they have to make
yeah.
statements in public.
Well,
about-
it just it
I mean, if we ask them to tell us where they stand on things, it might embarrass them. It's
No.
no. Oh,
No, I think substantively, there may be some value in doing it before the legislative session, particularly if we're working on our own bill. I mean, we do. I mean, I'd like to get an update. I'm assuming we've got a piece of legislation that's been filed. Maybe that's something that's worth discussing again. I don't know, but it may be helpful to hear from them. Maybe. After the elections, or maybe in the beginning of the year. I think that would, to me, the beginning of the year would be the best time.
Yeah, time.
Because
Okay.
what's happening is the governor's coming out with the budget, and you can get a sense of how some of the issues that are getting ready to be presented, in terms of the budget agenda. So I personally think the best time to do something like this is around the time the governor puts a budget out.
I
That
think
probably makes
one of the
sense.
things that we need to add too is the expansion of the rooms tax and what that really means to us.
Well, if I can just add, I think that may be doomed the way things are going right now. That there was an amendment off in the waning days of the session. The governor approached the legislative leadership with some additional suggestions in terms of addressing some issues that he was concerned about, and he raised some very legitimate points, and those amendments were not incorporated, or those recommendations were not incorporated before the legislature adjourned formal session. So, but the governor has the ability to offer the amendments. So, in informal, you need to have unanimous consent. I mean, everybody has to agree to the amendment, and the likelihood that the full legislature is going to agree to the governor's amendments is somewhere between 0 and 1 point, half a percent.
Should it become law, I think we should have an agenda topic.
Yeah.
Well, then I think the next question is going to be, and this is the reason why meeting with the legislative delegation at some point should happen early in the year, because by then there's going to be discussion on this topic.
Sure.
So I think it will be timely the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
So you could put that on the list, Tracy. I think it's great that you bring that up, because I think that's going to be the time they're going to wrestle with this and look at a revised bill. And I know you're very active with the Selectmen's Association. I think there are going to be more selectmen that will have an interest this time around in a new bill.
Okay.
And the only other thing is, I don't know if we want to add something about a workshop to really discuss, or maybe a public hearing, not public hearing, but public information about the school project ourselves. I'm not sure how we can fit that in before, that vote's December 10th?
4th, I think.
4th.
Yeah.
So, at some point in time before, we'll have to have some informational thing about the tax impact and such.
Yeah, I think that we should probably have a tentative agenda date for that, and so that we have it on the calendar.
I would agree. I think that's a
I
very,
agree
very...
with that, too. That's very important.
Yeah, good call.
We need to have it far enough in advance so that there's some...
People can benefit from the
think about
input,
it.
yeah.
And not too far in advance so that people don't
numbers
forget
are-
about it.
Right, well,
Or
and the
it-
numbers
it's
are
a
ever
follow-up.
changing.
Maybe mid-October.
So, but at what point in time do we need to take a vote to create a ballot?
On
To
our end of it,
be-
it's probably about 2 months out, or thereabouts, 45 days from the election date, because it has to get printed.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's something that we
It's
need
coming
to
up,
think about.
sure.
If the board wants to do the debt exemption at the same date, we need to make sure that we have a vote.
I agree with
to set a
Tracy. I think
ballot.
we need to put that on the calendar.
Yeah.
We have
It's
to note
probably right
that.
around October 30th then.
Right, we have to note the date that we want to vote on putting that on.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's a good spot for that then.
October 30th?
Yeah, that would be
Really?
2 months in advance.
No.
It would
No.
be short.
Back up
Early
to,
part of
yeah.
October would
Yeah.
be.
Count.
Yeah.
We
The
don't
beginning
want to
of
wait to
October.
let that slip away. We want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just over a month if we put it on for the 30th.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll fit that in late September, probably.
Okay.
Let's
Great.
just make sure we check the dates on that and make sure we hit all the
Yeah.
target dates.
The other thing, at some point, we should have an update on the action plan, how things are going with the implementation on that, on the vision software? Is that?
Invisio, yep.
Invisio, yeah.
So we're working, we finalized our priority projects based on the board's suggestions, and we are putting that into the system right now, and we'll shortly begin training staff. So I think probably mid-fall is a good point to be able to come back, update you on that progress, discuss reports, and that gives us an opportunity to also collectively discuss what we want to showcase to the public via the public dashboard. It'd be good to get the board's input on that before we head down that road to develop that.
Okay. All right.
Another item that I think we're going to have to take up, and I think we'll probably have more information, it's going to come up at the Cape Managers meeting, and that is cable. You know, at some point, we're going to have to, probably in the fall, is just have an update on cable going forward, because the window to negotiate the new agreement is opening starting now.
We don't have a cable advisory committee anymore, do we?
No, we don't.
We had
No. No, I think we need to look at that. What
Mr. McMahon
going forward?
used to do it.
What's that?
Jerry McMahon used to do it.
Jerry McMahon?
Yep.
We need to, I think through how we want that committee structured. I've spent some time talking to Dan and Chris that, you know, as we look forward, you know, as I think folks on the board are aware, I've been anxious to improve the quality of our communications capability. You know, we've got a government channel. We get funding for that, but we have very little programming on it. We have a website that needs significant improvement. And I'm very concerned about particularly the work going forward. You know, Tracy brought up the subject about educating people about the schools. It shouldn't be just board meetings where there's our opportunity to educate people. We can use the government TV station as a platform for us to make sure that the voters get information on what's going
I
on.
was just thinking about that when you were talking about your committee members, because Jerry Sullivan had a wonderful video he created that kind of gave an insight to the committees, and
Yeah.
it was a great video that played on Channel 18. It was
Yeah, I mean, we're getting money from Comcast to run a government TV channel, and we take that money and use it in-house. But the reality is I think we can do a better job in putting more programming. I think for the Water Resources Advisory Committee, given the nature of the work and the nature of that mission and what's going on with that group, I think our ability to engage the community, and it gets enhanced significantly if we can get more use of that TV channel, and if we can get more use of our website to provide background information on the developments of the committee. There are a lot of people in town I know that would be open and be interested in this work and would probably actually watch some of the stuff, you know, on our government TV channel, or even watching it even on the website. So I honestly believe that the success of the Water Resources Advisory Committee, the success of our board in addressing many of these issues, particularly these ones, the more we can get this information before the residents of the town, the better served, you know, they'll be. And so at some point, you know, I really think cable and communications and getting the word out needs to be on the agenda, and we have to at least talk on, rather than figure out the date when it gets implemented, but at least have a discussion about some of the things that we should be trying to improve upon and how we can do it going forward. So I'd like to see that become a priority, Mr. Chairman.
All right, let's get it on the list and see where we can fit it in. Okay. All right, let's move forward. Any other individual items? Forward. Okay. Town Administrator.
Yes, we have 3 items on the consent agenda relative to communication from the Cape and Islands Suicide Prevention Coalition dated July 31, 2018, a request for a proclamation. Then there's also from the Marine Corps Detachment number 125, request to place the toll booth on Route 28 on October 6, 2018 for charity collection, and then the Garden Club of Yarmouth, permission to solicit donations.
So I move the consent agenda.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Great, thank you. In your packet, I had some very good news for the town. We received notification of a number of grants in the last couple of weeks. One of them was a grant to help improve our stormwater situation, $63,510. That'll be worked through a longstanding project on the queue for Public Works. Mr. Colby, if you could help me with what you're planning on doing with that?
Yes, very briefly on that grant. That is to finish construction at a stormwater system that is designed to remove nitrogen and other contaminants. It is a constructed kind of gravel wetland situation. We've done a similar one in Pawnee, but this one will be on Gleason. Part of that same grant program last year, we got the funds to design the project, so it's all designed, ready to go. These funds are for construction of that and design of the next one. So we just want to show and document that we're doing things for nitrogen removal that are outside of the wastewater realm. There's obviously nitrogen that's contributed from stormwater, and this is a way to help deal with that as well through the grant process. And so there is a matching portion as far as the town's concerned, but that's just 25% of the cost.
Thank you. We also received notification of a Homeland Security grant, assistance to firefighters in the amount of $114,546. There's a matching cost of 10% to the town, which is $11,454, which is within the fire department budget, related to replacing vehicle exhaust systems at headquarters in Station 2. It's a state-of-the-art exhaust system that the fire department's very pleased. There's a lot of issues these days around firefighters and cancer and air emissions within the facilities, and this is will help address that problem at those two stations. In the last one, there isn't an official press document. I was waiting for the Congressman's office to notify us, but we were notified that we have been the recipients of that SAFER grant for those four firefighter paramedic positions. So there'll be more detailed information and likely a press announcement to participate in at a later date. But that certainly is very good news. We worked really hard, and the board took a tough vote to expand fees related to the paramedic service, and that helped to finance the long-term stability. And now we have the grant, and we'll be able to go down the process of, for the first time since 2003, adding 4 firefighter paramedic types to the fire service here in town. So great team effort. Phil Simonian, the chief, Deputy Chief Sawyer, and Rich Bienvenu all collaborated on these efforts to get them over the finish line.
That's great. Well, congratulations to
Thank
them.
you.
And to you. The I don't know if people realize that some of these grant applications can be they can be really nasty to put together. They really can. I mean, it seems like every year they get more complicated, more difficult. You get more staffers pulling hair out of their head.
And very competitive.
Exactly. And so whoever's doing these grants in the fire department, they deserve 2 thumbs up, big time, because I've had my share of grant applications that I've written, and my God, it's just awful these days. So please thank them for all their work.
Absolutely. They, like I said, these are very competitive times, and they did a great job bringing that one particularly over the finish line, so.
That's great.
Other than that, I know that, like I mentioned, there's a building committee meeting tomorrow night, 5 o'clock, at the DY High School Library on the building committee project. So hopefully we'll get some updated information for you at that point. And the water resources planning, we were successful with Representative Whalen and getting $1 million put into the environmental bond bill for the DHY project at some future date. If we get all agreements from the towns in place, there could be that first $1 million chip towards construction, which is also good news. That's a long way to go, though.
So we could put that on the agenda item for our reps too, right? Because they got money in the bond bill. We can be talking about when they're going to get that money.
Yeah.
It's it's great to get the money in the bond bill. It's another thing to get it out of the bond bill once you get it in. All right. Right. We all know that, right, Dan?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You never know till you know.
Right. So we can bring that. That's on our. Add that to our list.
Okay.
Yep.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Well, I'm certainly not opposed.